religion and also literature and information technology. So I'm sure all the material that you will share with us will be very valuable to our students and to our lecturers in here. This event is attended by lecturers but also by our students as well. So first of all, I would like to welcome Pak Alamsyah. Pak Alamsyah is our Vice Dean for the Academic and Student Relations. So I would like to welcome Pak Alamsyah.
Okay, thank you, Pak Herianto. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning in Portugal and good afternoon from Diponegoro University Semarang, Indonesia, and in Malaysia. The Honorable Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Diponegoro University, the Excellency, our guest, Professor Vitor Texera, PhD, from Universidade Católica Portuguesa, and Professor Sarjit Singhil from University Putra Malaysia. The lecturers, students from Undip and from outside Undip, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming and welcome to our Faculty of Humanities for the International Seminar on Culture, Religion, History, and Information Technology. Previously, I would like to thank Dr. Afrisa from Diponegoro University and Dr. Daya from Lisbon, who recommended the two speakers above. The topic of culture, religion, history, and information technology are taken in order to accommodate and cover the existence of various study programs of Faculty of Humanities, such as the History Study Program, Social Anthropology, Indonesia Literature, English Literature, Japanese Language and Culture, Linguistic and Library Science. Of course, this topic has not been able to accommodate the knowledge of each study program. However, this topic is an effort to get closer to the big scientific theme in the faculty scale, namely the Faculty Humanities. Professor Vitor Texera is from School of Art in Universidade Católica Portuguesa. He has some interest about intercultural studies, history of Portuguese expansion in Indonesia, Portuguese art and heritage in Southeast Asia, intercultural relation in Southeast Asia, Islamic culture, religion and art, and so on. He will convey about religious dynamic and Portuguese Indonesia encounter during the 16th century. And then Professor Sarjit Singhil is a professor of social anthropology at the Department of Social and Development Sciences, Faculty of Human Ecology, University Putra Malaysia. He has some interest on minority study by studying other ethnic minority communities in the country, including orang asli or indigenous group in Peninsular Malaysia and selected native group in Sabah and Sarawak. He has interest about sustainable development as articulated in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. He will convey about cultural preservation through information and communication technology in Malaysia. I think the topic above are very important in order to enrich our knowledge and understanding the religious relation as well as the relationship between Indonesia and Portugal in the 16th century in one aspect. In another aspect, we also want to capture how rich its Indonesia cultural heritage and historical heritage can be preserved by using information technology so that the cultural heritage is well preserved and documented by taking in comparison from Malaysia. This international seminar is part of a good relationship with the two speakers. In the future, we hope that it can be strengthened and continue the collaboration in the letter of agreement between our faculties, joint research and joint publication. And for information, we will give all the participants a certificate by filling in the present link that we will send later on the catwalk. Once again, thanks to the speaker, Professor Vitor and Professor Sarjit, the moderator, Mbak Nali, and UP3 Herianto, PhD, and all the participants. And then I will ask the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities officially open the international seminar. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Pak Alam, for the opening speech. And now I would like to welcome our Dean from the Faculty of Humanities, Ibu Nur Hayati, for formally opening our international seminar today. Please, Bu Nur Hayati.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon from Indonesia and good morning in Italy, and greeting from Semarang. The honorable invited speakers, the first is Professor Vitor Texera, PhD, the Research Center in Science and Technology of Art, Universidade Católica Portuguesa. Is it right that I spell? Yeah. Okay.
Good spelling. Okay.
Yeah.
Terima kasih. Very good.
And then the second one, the honorable speakers to Professor Dr. Sarjit Singh, Department of Social Science and Development, University Putra, Malaysia. So, okay. Nice to meet you in this virtual meeting for both of you. And I also want to greet Mr. Ralph Woken that, sorry, I haven't answered your question why in Indonesia there is not holiday, but in Malaysia, today is a holiday. Yeah, okay. Yeah, because there is our government's policy to avoid the long weekend in Indonesia, of course, to avoid the spread of COVID-19, right? Yeah, and then the honorable guest, the professor in Diponegoro University, and then the vice dean one, Bapak Dr. Alamsa, and also the head of the research center, Bapak Herianto, and also all of the lecturers, yeah, and then students, and of course all the participants in this seminar. Thank you very much for coming in this seminar. And you know that this international seminar is a part of the activity for celebrating the Dies Natalis of our university. So the age of our university, Diponegoro University, is 64. So old enough for a university. And we are very happy because as a part of the humanity faculties, and you know that in Undip, there are 3 social sciences faculties. One is the Faculty of Humanities, and then the second one is the Social and Political faculties, and then the third is Economic faculty. So the faculty, our Faculty of Humanities, is one and the only one in Undip that focusing on research and also conducting the academic activity regarding to the culture and art. And we know that the melted point between culture and religion always interests many researchers. Yeah, so especially in Indonesia, the collaboration between culture and religion is a very unique. So that is why the team here, the committee, chose the topic of the culture, religion, history, and information technology. And you know that here in this technological era and digital transformation, we try to place the position of culture, religion, and history, yeah, among the others, among the other themes. Yeah, so that is why I hope that all of the participants here will enjoy this international seminar that is very interesting. And again, thank you very much, Professor Vitor and Professor Sarjit, for being speakers in this seminar. on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities, I'm apologize if there is something in a problem during this seminar, and we hope that that is not the first and the last time we meet, but we hope that we will conduct next collaboration with all of you, especially in conducting a research collaboration, and then joint publication, and maybe sometimes we will invite you to give a general lecture again in a certain study program in our faculty. And as Dr. Alamsah said, that we have 10 study programs. There are 6 bachelor degrees, and then 2 magister degrees and 1 doctoral degree. So we open the opportunity to conduct a collaboration with all of you. Yeah, so we can join to conduct the research about the culture, about the humanity aspect in Indonesia, and especially in Semarang. And I'm very happy because Professor Vitor, and if I'm not mistaken, can speak Indonesian fluently, so it can help the participant to increase the braveness to ask you using bahasa Indonesia, Prof. Vitor. Yeah.
I hope one day.
And of course, Prof. Sarjit is familiar with Malay language. That is one family with Indonesian language. Well, I think that is enough from me. Thank you very much. And as our religion, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I open this international seminar with the topics of culture, religion, history, and information technology. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Ibu Nurhayati, for giving the opening speech for our seminar today. Now, I would like to welcome our moderator, Ibu Nurnaili. So, Ibu Nurnaili will moderate all the discussions and from the talks that will be given by Professor Vitor and Professor Sarjit. I would like to welcome. We usually call her Mbak because and Mbak Nurlaili. Please, Mbak Nurlaili.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Pak Heri, for the occasion. Thank you very much for Bu Dekan and Pak Alamsah for the opportunity to us to lead the discussion in the discussion session. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start the presentation from the honorable speakers, and in order to avoid any disturbance during the presentation, I think I would like to ask you to change the mode of your mobile phone first, into silent, because I've noticed that several attendees here doesn't move into silent mode. Well, thank you again, the Honorable Professor Dr. Vitor Texera, the Honorable Professor Dr. Sarjit from Malaysia, Prof. Vitor from Portugal, the Honorable distinguished guests, fellow students, and ladies and gentlemen that coming to this webinar. First of all, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar, which held by the Faculty of Humanities under the topic Cultures, Religion, History, and Information Technology. As it is mentioned by the Dean that the urgency of this webinar's topic is very important actually to be discussed. So in this occasion, we shall have outstanding presentations from our prominent speakers, whom I believe that they will give us any insights and knowledge regarding the themes of this webinar. Before the presentation begin, allow me as moderator to introduce the presenters. First presenter is Professor Dr. Vitor Texera. Prof. Vitor is a professor at School of Arts, Universidad Católica Portuguesa. He has several interests in the field of history and cultural studies, for example, history of Portuguese expansion, which I mentioned that this is important to us as history students to study history of Southeast Asia and Indonesia in particular. Portuguese art and heritage in Southeast Asia, history of intercultural relations in Southeast Asia, history of old and rare books. This is very, this is new topic for us as a historian in Indonesia to be studied well, and history of book and evaluation of old rare books.
That's okay.
Yeah, as I noticed also that Prof. Vitor also authors some books. One of this prominent book entitled A History of Portuguese People in Macau, because I observed in the Google book, and I found that your book entitled History of Portuguese People in Macau is on the first list.
Yeah.
Well, he has also published scientific papers in the international reputable journals. He involves on the several books translation that is also important for the historians, for the history students, for the cultural studies students. For example, here I noticed that Prof. Vitor involves on the translation book entitled A Historia de Arte.
Yes,
Am I correct?
Yes,
yeah. Which has been translated to Italian language. So therefore, Prof. Texera has mastered foreign languages with excellence on Italian, Spanish, English, French, and Swedish. Yeah. Prof. Vitor has good cooperation with Indonesian institutions. I have also noticed that Prof. Vitor has involved in cooperation as scientific teams with Pak Alamsyah, with Dr. Alamsyah, and Dharma Bhakti Lestari Foundation in order to carry out Ratu Kalinyamat as our national figure. Am I correct?
Yes.
Pak Dr. Alamsyah and Prof. Vitor.
On my part, it's okay.
Yeah. And we move to Prof. Sarjit. Prof. Sarjit S. Gill is a professor of social anthropology at the Department of Social and Development Sciences, Faculty of Human Ecology, University Putra, Malaysia. Since the joining of the academic staff at UPM in 2000, correct, Prof. Sarjit? He has nurtured and developed his research interests and core expertise primarily in minority studies, especially in the Sikh community of Malaysia. We have also Sikh community in Indonesia, in Jakarta, and several Sikh community in Surabaya. And this is important topic that we should know from Prof. Sarjit. Over the years, he has extended his interest on minority studies by studying other ethnic minority communities in the country, including Orang Asli or indigenous groups in Malay Peninsula and selective native groups in Sabah and Sarawak. Of course, in publication, we cannot judge Prof. Sarjit because he has more than 100 journal papers. 100 journal papers. It's excellent, Prof. Sarjit. Which has been cited and referred by other journals. 10 books. Prof. Sarjit has published 10 books, 46 chapters, 25 proceedings, and 6 modules, and 80 popular writing and other publications. With such fine reputation and respect, he is often referred by various circles nationally and international events. Well, without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker to present, to give us insight and knowledge for today's webinar. first speaker, I would like to ask Professor Vitor Texera to present and give us knowledge about his works or his findings.
Okay, thank
Time
you.
is yours, Prof. Vitor.
Okay, how many minutes I have? Sorry. How many time I have to my speech?
Oh, sorry. How many times, Pak Heri?
40 minutes, no?
40 minutes. Is it correct?
Yeah, 40 to
40.
45 will be fine, Prof. Vitor.
40 to 45 minutes. Well,
Will be
it depends
fine,
on your presentation, Prof. It's flexible
Yeah.
for us.
Okay, thank you. Oke, selamat siang.
Sure.
Terima kasih atas undangan yang terhormat untuk seminar ini, Profesor Alamsyah, dan untuk kehormatan berpartisipasi dalam pertemuan ini di Indonesia. Assalamualaikum for everybody. I'm sorry for my poor bahasa Indonesia. I'm trying to restart again, but my time is very few for this. Thank you very much for the honorable invitation to participate in this seminar. As a speaker, I thank Professor Alamsyah this opportunity and honor, as well as the possibility to study Indonesia in its rich history and in the formation of its national identity. Sorry for my weak Indonesian bahasa. It's been 20 years since I studied it for a year. I'm going to talk about a theory about a kind of race in the conversion of Southeast Asian populations. It's not a race in the literal sense, but it's the result of a series of geopolitical incidences and tensions between Muslims and the Portuguese Kafirs, and also the Spanish, therefore Christians also. I hope it will be understandable.
Yes.
I will read my paper. I think it's more profitable to be understood. This kind of a race in the proposal of the conversion of the populations. I'm European. I come from a Christian culture, but I will try to follow to be a servant of the truth without any emphasis of Europeans or each one or another. I will try to be a realist according to the facts and to the documents. It is a matter of fact impossible to understand the spread of Islam in the archipelago unless one takes into account the antagonism between the Muslim traders and the Portuguese. I'm based in many aspects in the Azumardi Azra from the theory of Schrick, 1957. Well, and also Anthony Reid or de Graaf, Pijot, and other classical authors. And mainly I will try to see from the part of the Muslim sources, Ottoman, Mamluk, and Arabic sources, even from the reports of the traders, for example, Ibn Battuta, before the spread of the Western expansion in the archipelago. This theory of the race between Islam and Christianity is one of the most hotly debated theories concerning the spread of Islam and Christianity in the Malay-Indonesian archipelago. Since the time Schrick proposed his theory, some other scholars have questioned its validity. One of the hardened critics, as Hazra said, of Shrik's theory is Naguib al-Attas. He refused to accept the argument put forward by this Dutch scholar, Shrik, that competition among Muslims and Christians had accelerated the spread of Islam, particularly between the 11th and the 17th centuries. I will be focused on the period between 1530 and 1670. Okay, Al-Attas is one of the opinion that there is no continuation of the crusades between Islam and Christianity in the archipelago, since Islam did not regard Christianity as a serious contender. Furthermore, according to Al-Attas, it is well known that it was only from the 19th century onwards that Christianity made any impact at all in the archipelago. Al-Attas could be right, okay, since he is one of the scholars who proposed that Islam had spread in the archipelago, albeit in limited numbers, since the 1st century of Islam or the 7th century of the Christian era. The Portuguese had not arrived in the region during this period, but Al-Attas seems to have misread, Shrik's theory, in my opinion, and like Mr. Hazra, for example, since the Dutch scholar proposed that the race between Islam and Christianity took place mostly in the 16th century, during which period the Portuguese attempted very seriously to gain the upper hand in the Malay-Indonesian archipelago. Taking into consideration recent studies on the spread of Islam and Christianity, one may be tempted to accept Shrik's theory. One of such recent studies is the remarkable and notorious theories and works of the, Professor Anthony Reid. What we can talk about Reid is a classical, is a major author, implicitly accepting the basic argument of Shrik. Reid proposes that what was taking place during the same period, as put forward by Shrik, was the polarization between global religions and the rise of religious boundaries, particularly between Islam and Christianity, particularly in the Indian Ocean, mainly in the archipelago, from the pivotal platform that will be Malacca in the Malay Peninsula. The increasingly sharper polarization between the two religions basically result from the race between them, between commas, to win new converts. As Reid argues, the 16th century large numbers of people, both rural and urban, were clearly converting to Islam and identifying themselves as part of an international Islamic community, Dar al-Islam, the Ummah. This explicit identification, according to Reid, can be attributed primarily to two factors. First, the direct and intense shipping links between Southeast Asia and the Red Sea area. For instance, for example, to the Hajj, to go to Mecca. And two, the sharper polarization between the Dar al-Islam, abode of Islam, and its enemies, Dar al-Arar, or the abode of war. Reflecting on the theory of Islamization in the archipelago, the Shrik theory has a lot of truth, though has Mailing Roelofs, another important expert about this topic, reminds us, Mr. Roelofs, the crusading motive on the part of the Portuguese must not be overemphasized. The theory combined with other theories, in fact, can give us a better grasp of not only the history of Islamization, but also of the Christianity in the archipelago. Not only that, the Shriek theory remains relevant to subsequent and recent history of the two religions in Indonesia in particular. In fact, the contemporary period is witnessing the ever-heated competition between Islamic dakwah, the preaching, and Christian missions in order to win new converts. We have to think that in the background of the missionary efforts, in the background of the Islam and the Christianity, we have the trade, we have the business, we have economy, and at the other hand, the rise of empires focused in the control of the straits and the archipelago. But we have also changes in the geopolitical scenario in Indonesia. I have to remind again Ratu Kencana, Kalinyamat, and the uprising of the Islamic sultanates in Sumatra and mainly in Java, replacing the Majapahit kingdoms, Hinduist kingdoms, and the opportunity to gain a new faith in order to rebuild the political scenario, for instance, in Java, for example. Well, an overview about this race theory. To begin with, according to Shriek, the Portuguese expansion in the archipelago can be viewed as a sequel of the Crusades in Europe and the Middle East. Well, I agree in a big part on this idea. In the opinion of Shriek, it was actually the lust for adventure and the ambition for nobility combined with religious zeal, which were the driving forces setting the expansion of the Portuguese in motion. Well, our Henry the Navigator, a prince, a very important prince in Portugal, he was the most important man stimulating the Portuguese expansion. He wrote that one of the proposals of our needs to expand outside of Portugal, it was really the spirit of crusade. This is a statement and it's recorded in the documents and the archives. He was really focused in the spirit of the spiritual conquest of the peoples. It was a zeal pursued by him. Following the expulsion of the Moors, we call Mouros, the Muslims, from the Iberian Peninsula, the Portuguese, after having gained a foothold in Ceuta, in Morocco, in Maghreb, in 1415, proceeded to make further conquests along the west coast and finally rounded the Cape of Good Hope on their way to India and the Malay-Indonesian archipelago. We crossed the Cape in 1488 and we reached India later in the second try in 1498, Kozhikode, Calicut, and we reached Malacca. We conquered Malacca in 1511. I'm talking we conquered because it were the Portuguese. I'm not a conqueror, okay? Shriek emphasizes more than any other factor the crusading spirit in the following way. The religious zeal nourished in the tradition of the Crusades and the remembrance of the bitter struggle with the Moors in the Iberian Peninsula certainly continue to be an essential motivation. The religious element remained a factor of significance in Spanish politics in later times as well. For the inhabitants of the Iberian Peninsula, a Mohammedan Muslim was a Moor, M-O-O-N-R, an object of abhorrence. In the past, it was not only that the Portuguese and the Spaniards, or the Europeans as a whole, harbored an antipathy and hatred for the Muslims and their faith that they considered heathenism, a kind of paganism, a kind of, well, it was the Crusade spirit in the past, Eurocentrism that we have to fight, in my opinion, because we have to think globally. Well, furthermore, according to Schrick, in this way, the Crusade ideal continued its influence. For a long time, the Portuguese had in mind closing an alliance with the legendary Christian ruler, Prester John, Preste João in Portuguese, whose empire was thought to be located in India, but they discovered that it was in Ethiopia. With his help, they hoped to be able to bring the crusade against the Moors to a successful end in the heart of their own territory. Proposing this strong argument, we can list harsh and violent encounters between Islam and Christianity. The conflicts, I'm sorry, the light of the window, I'm sorry.
It is too bright.
Oh, it's worse. Okay. It's okay. Sorry. Proposing this strong argument, we can list the harsh and violent encounters between Islam and Christianity. The conflicts between the two were clearly motivated not only by religion, but also by political and economic interests. Perhaps it's the real focus on this. This can be clearly in the accounts given by Schrick that when Constantinople had fallen first in the Crusades in 1204, the Abbasid Caliphate had succumbed before the Mongol hordes, and well, with lots of events that he described, we can emphasize and underline these medieval encounters, violence between the Crusades, the Christian Crusades, and the Muslims in the Mediterranean, and extended to the Red Sea and later to the Indian Ocean. The predominant Muslim position in the international trade was also represented by Muslim outposts along the southern coast of the Indian subcontinent. That will be a very important area, mainly the Gujarat area in the northwest of India. The influence and the importance in the Islamization, for example, in the Malay Peninsula and the archipelago, the merchant traders from Gujarat, mainly, that they were very important in the beginning of the spreading of Islam in Java and Sumatra, and later, after the Battle of Talikota, for example, international global alliance made by the Indian sultans and the most important kingdoms and realms, Islam sultanates in Asia, against the Portuguese and the Indians in India. They defeated the Portuguese in Talikota, and later they create a kind of uprising and the beginning of the hand of the Portuguese in the Indonesia before the coming of the Dutch period in 1600, as you know. It was very important in this aspect, the Battle of Talikota. One of the allies in this important battle, it was the Ratu Kencana, a very important woman in the history of the Islam in Java. She was responsible for alliances among the sultanates and the uprising of Islam in Java, for example. In fact, they had the sultanates of Gujarat. They had been supposed to have not only played a significant role in the Muslim international trade, but also in the spread of Islam, including supposedly in the Malay-Indonesian archipelago. By the beginning of the 16th century, Gujarati merchants dominated all the important trading centers in the Indian Ocean trade routes. The Gujarati, we had a colony there, DIU, D-I-U, a very important settlement, commercial and political, artistical also settlement in Gujarati southern peninsula. The Gujarati merchants mingled with the Arab and Persian traders could be found in the large numbers in Malacca and probably also in Pasai, northeast Sumatra. Pasai, it was a very important, perhaps one of the first steps that outposts we tried to put our step in the archipelago with the Portuguese and the Europeans. Even before the attacks of Malacca, Pasai was the first, one of the first toponyms that we search and try to get for our domination, but in the northeast of Sumatra, but very close of Pasai, as you better know. It's the most important Indonesian sultanate, Sumatra Sultanate, Aceh, that they were the real biggest enemies of our tries to dominate the archipelago. Thus, as Kirti Kaudiri concludes, another important historian that I read for this paper, by all accounts, the 14th and 15th century were unusually prosperous in the history of the Indian Ocean trade. The vivid, we are now talking about the uprising of the Indian Ocean in the nowadays geopolitical scenarios, and we have to remind it's one of the importance of the studies on Indonesian archipelago, that the Indian Ocean, it's the center of the world since 5 centuries ago, and these happenings, these events can comprove this. The vivid travel accounts of Ibn Battuta in 1345 and 1346 about the Muslim trading centers extending from North Africa, he was Moroccan, from Al-Maghrib to the Far East, were later confirmed by travelers of the 15th century, such as the Persian ambassadors Abd al-Razak Samarkandi. He was a very important traveler in the Indonesian archipelago in 1413, and he lived until 1482. The Venetian Nicolas Santo Stefano. Prior this, we were Italian friars that they travel on the archipelago, and they gave, as you can see on the watch on the PowerPoint that I give to Professor Alamsia, the travels of the Indonesian European friars envoys from the Pope and they report about Java, about Sumatra, about the Malay Peninsula, about the Straits, and they gave the first informations to the West about the archipelago. And at the same time, a little bit before Ibn Battuta. Based on their accounts, the Portuguese policy makers, they created a great plan to enter the lucrative trade. But Kirti Kaudiri maintains the arrival of the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean abruptly ended the system of the peaceful oceanic navigation that was such a marked feature of the region. Yes, indeed. The southeastern archipelago and the contest and international connections, the race in commas for religion, trade and power in the Indian Ocean region began in 1492 with Christopher Columbus' discovery while in the service of the Spain of the so-called New World, after being disappointed by Portuguese royal patronage. 6 years later, on 18 May 1498, the Portuguese Vasco da Gama entered the Indian Ocean with his small fleet and was piloted across the open sea from East Africa by an Indian navigator. Finally, they dropped anchor before Calicut, Kozhikode, the Malabar Emporium. With the arrival of the Portuguese in India in 1498, as for example, Mr. Shricks points out, the two opposing parties, Christian and Muslims, stood poised for head-on collision. On the one end, there were Muslims who had for hundreds of years carried on an extensive and profitable trade as the unchallenged masters of the Indian Ocean. They believed that it was in their interest, commercial as well as religious, to exclude any possible rivals, particularly the kafir or unbelieving Europeans. On the other hand, there were the Christian Portuguese, who looked upon the Muslims as their natural enemies. The Portuguese conquerors, made it no secret that their hostility against Muslims derived from the state of perpetual war. I'm sorry.
Apologize, Prof. Vitor. Let us help to share your PowerPoint. We will help you.
You cannot share the PowerPoint.
Firstly, we don't see that you have shared your PowerPoint, but we've got your PowerPoint, and let us share your PowerPoint. Is it okay?
Okay, I will try to, give me, concede me more minutes later.
No, maybe the committee will help to share the PowerPoint.
No, but I can share if you permit me.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, Japara. It's okay? It's available now? Okay, thank you.
Yes, it is.
Well, just to make a, it's my outdoor, okay, with my contacts, and about our, the Portuguese views, impressions about the Malay Peninsula, the kingdom of Malacca, that we well, withdrawn in the Casenatense Codex in the Vatican Library. I'm sorry, this is the Odorico of Pordenone, the friar who came from Italy. He was a Venetian, and he was one of the first explorers of the Southeast Asia. He traveled to China and he visited Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and Malay Peninsula before going to southern of China. Like Marignoli, like another one more unknown, James of Harland, he was a very important voyager. I'm trying to discover a little bit more about him, an Irish friar, and about his impressions of the Southeast Asia region. The travel of the friars, the Franciscans, also the Dominicans, they will be very important in the future, in the 16th and the 17th century in the Southeast Asia, in this aspect of the the projects of Christianization of the areas, and in this topic of the race, they will be one of the actors of this theater of conversions. They come with different strategies, and the populations, they will be very astonished with the rivalries between the Christians, among the Christians, with different factions, and that will be a very important reason that many populations, they will prefer to convert to the Islam, the more unified religion than the disputes among the Christians, among the Spanish, the Spaniards in Philippines, the Portuguese in Malacca, and other aspects. Well, having gained a stronghold in India, the Portuguese soon began to launch their sacred mission and put into practice a privilege allowed them through an extraordinary blessing of God, in the Portuguese words, to cleanse the earth of as many Muslims as possible. I'm quoting, it's not my words, of course, it belongs to the past, but unfortunately, it was the mentalities of the era, of this age. Therefore, as early as 1500, the Portuguese attacked all Muslim merchant vessels on the open seas, including the ships of the Mamluks, sultans of Egypt. They also seized, it's very sad, but it's true. They seized, they plundered, and they killed all the crew and passengers of the Mecca ships, a large Muslim merchant ships that also carried the Hajj pilgrims. Atrocities that have not escaped the attention of Muslim historiographers. For example, and it's important, we see the opinion with the eyes of the Muslim chroniclers has Hadramaut in Yemen, for instance, referring to the Portuguese military campaigns in the early 16th century, recorded vividly in this year, 1502, 1503, in the month of Rajab, the vessels of the Franks, the Arabic term for all the Europeans, Franks, Farangi, Kafir, the Kafir, the pagans, appeared at the sea en route for India, Hormuz in Persia, and those parts. They took about 7 vessels. They killed those on board and making some prisoners. This was their first action. May God curse them. Well, the violent attitude of the Portuguese created not only what Kaudiri calls a catastrophe for the commercial activities in the Indian Ocean, but also a religious rage on the part of Mamluk sultans, and later, as we can see, the Ottoman sultans as well. The Mamluk sultans of Egypt, after receiving complaints from the Muslim rulers of Gujarat and the southern Yemen, they dispatched Fra Mauro, Italian prior of the monastery of the Zion on Mount Sinai, to the Pope in Rome, protesting the barbaric conduct. Fra Mauro, he was a Catholic friar, okay? Protesting the barbaric conduct of the Portuguese, the Sultan warned that he could take the retaliatory measures against the Christian pilgrims in Palestine. The protest, which the Pope passed on to the Portuguese king Manuel I, produced no change in Portuguese behavior. The Portuguese, I'm sorry, but I will reveal to you a very important commander of the Portuguese forces in the Indian Ocean. He wrote to the King Manuel this: "My king, if you permit me, I have the solution for these disputes. I will attack Mecca, destroy Mecca, and we will end the wall of the rivalries, and we end this situation." Of course, the king, he wrote, no, you are completely nuts, you are mad, it's not a solution. You will empower, you will put fuel on the fire, so stop. Well, you can imagine what could happen if this commander tried to attack. Because we have to remind that the Venetians, the Catholic Venetians, Italians, they were in coalition, in an alliance with the Turks, the Ottomans, and the Mamluks, even the Gujarati sultanates, for example. In contrast, they intensified the Portuguese, their zeal to destroy the Muslim trade, as well as pursuing their passion for a trade monopoly by venturing farthest east to the Straits of Malacca and to Maluku, or the Moluccas. The goal, the main objective of the Portuguese, the spicy route in Moluccas. And Ratu Kencana, the Queen Kaliamat, she tried to stop this route, and she was very important. We have to perhaps to study the action of the Queen Kaliamat to avoid the presence of the Portuguese and the disventures of the Portuguese there, because we were defeated, and we have to leave the Moluccas archipelago, Ternate, Tidor, and Ambon, well, 3 small islands, and we have to stop our trade routes, and the gloves smuggle the trade. As raid shows, the Portuguese as a rule targeted the harbor towns at which the whole of the Southeast Asia export trade appeared to be concentrated, and Malacca was such a city. Given the terror which the Portuguese had already spread everywhere in the Indian Ocean, it is no surprise that as soon as they made their first contact with Malacca in 1509, they met with a strong opposition of its population, consisting mainly of Javanese, South Indians from Kerala, from Comorin Cape, Gujarati, Shams, Tagalogs from Philippines, and others. Since the possession of Malacca was crucial for their monopoly, the Portuguese made no concessions. They were finally able to conquer the city in 1511 as raid expansions for 3 reasons. Firstly, because they concentrated on it and intensity of firepower unprecedented in the region below the wings. Secondly, because of the element of surprise. And thirdly, because much of the city population quickly deserted the Sultan of Malacca. The Portuguese were, just to show the other travelings in the Asia, the encounters. Another very important figure in this Saint Francis Xavier, well, what he did in the Moluccas, it was completely empty by the defeat of the Portuguese there. And the trade routes, I'm talking about these areas of the Indian Ocean, as for your attention. The Portuguese were also able to hold it in spite of a dozen massive sieges conducted, for instance, by the Chinese during the ensuing century, because they constructed a fort that was very difficult to breach. How many time I have to finish my presentation? In my, okay.
Maybe 10 minutes left, Professor.
How many?
Maybe around 10 to 15 minutes left.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Sorry. This is particularly true, the involving of the Portuguese in the Muslim trades in the archipelago. This is particularly true since the Portuguese conquests were accompanied by vigorous missionary activities, and this stirred the Muslims to action in their turn. The strongest and fiercest opponent of the Portuguese in the archipelago, no doubt, was the Ashanese Aceh Sultanate. Sorry, my spelling, Aceh. Aceh, okay. The strongest, after the Portuguese conquest of Malacca, 1511, Aceh had replaced Malacca as the major Muslim trade force in the Indian Ocean the first quarter of the 16th century, and had established strong international relations with some Middle Eastern countries, particularly the Ottoman Sultanate, and with Jepara, the Queen of Jepara, and another smallest sultanates in the archipelago. But the Queen of Jepara was perhaps the strongest ally of Aceh sultans. And she was not able to defeat the Portuguese, well, according to the weapons, according to powder and other topics in the artillery, for example, when the Portuguese, they were strongest then because they used the artillery in the vessels, and the sultanates no. Well, Aceh eventually proved to be invincible to Portuguese encroachment and attacks. The Ashanese, on the other hand, attacked the Portuguese in Malacca on several occasions, some of them with the alliance, the important alliance, I repeat, of Queen of Jepara. She was a very strong and incredible woman. We have to underline and we have to remind always this. She was a really Indonesian pre-colonial heroine. The first open conflict and hostilities between the Portuguese and the Ashanese in the Indian Ocean took place in 1526. An Ashanese big ship destined for Jeddah in Arabia Peninsula was seized by the Portuguese in the Arabian Sea, and its cargo was sold in Hormuz. Several years later, the Portuguese, they captured more Ashanese ships and plundered their valuable cargoes off the coast of Arabia. The Portuguese were in a stronger position to be aggressive. As Rick Leves points out, they had reached a level of technological progress that would bring their nation into one of the most daring overseas adventurers of all time. They began to use, as I said, artillery aboard ship. Well, despite the more advanced armament of the Portuguese and their continued harassment and encroachment, it's very sad for the Portuguese, but it's the true. Chinese ships were able to maintain their voyages across the Indian Ocean. The two Portuguese fleets sent in 1554 and 1555 to intercept Chinese ships were unsuccessful. We suffered defeats against the Chinese. Only in Malacca we can support and we can resist it, and we can counterattack the Chinese. In the deep sea, in many years and many times we suffered defeats. Well, but the Portuguese chroniclers, they forgot many of these defeats, and we have to read in the sources of Malay sources and Samarkandi, the ambassadors, and later another Yemenite and Ottoman chronicles. Well, I have a list of the Venetian sources talking about these encounters, but the Portuguese terror in the Indian Ocean had come to the attention of and became a matter of concern for the Ottoman sultans. There is a little doubt that Malay Indonesian rulers, especially the Chinese, were well aware the strong naval power of the Ottomans and its increasingly predominant position on the trade of the Indian Ocean in the 16th century. Not only that, but also given the fact that the Ottomans were co-religionists of the Muslim Chinese, it can reasonably be expected that they saw the Ottomans as their patrons. The possibility of Ottoman support for the Chinese and their intervention in the Indian Ocean was a great concern for the Portuguese. As early as 1519, the Portuguese in Malacca were worried by rumors of the dispatch by the Grand Turk of a Turkish fleet to help the Malaccan Muslims. According to Pigafetta, he was the chronicler of the voyage of Magellan, who reported the rumors. The Portuguese soon sent a fleet to the Red Sea to intercept the Turks. When the Portuguese spotted some Turkish galleys stranded on a beach near Adam, Yemen, they destroyed them without delay. Well, the Portuguese, Salman Reis, an Ottoman chronicler, a very famous, wrote, the Portuguese also controlled the port Pasai of the great island called Shamatira, Sumatra, situated onwards beyond the island of Ceylon, aforesaid. It is said that the Portuguese have 200 infidels living in Malacca. With 200 infidels, they also captured the port of Malacca opposite Sumatra. Apparently, all the spices come from these islands. Now this spice goes to Portugal. Formerly, before the Portuguese captured those ports, there used to be a great deal of revenue of the Ottoman from spices in Egypt and a great deal of goods available. It is said that the accursed Portuguese hold the aforementioned ports with only 2,000 men, 200, 2,000. The chroniclers, they were not very exact many times. Therefore, when our ships are ready and God willing, move against them, their total destruction will be inevitable, for one fortress is unable to support another, and they are not able to put the united opposition. Well, the Portuguese, on the other hand, and I will begin to finish, I know, I have my time being over. On the other hand, the Portuguese and followed these Islamic connections against them very closely. We have to remind a very important Portuguese writer, Fernão Mendes Pinto, who was in the Straits of Malacca region in the late 1530s, reported that the Sultan Al-Kahar had already forged an alliance with 160 Turks, some Abyssinians, a numbered Gujaratis, and some 200 Malabari mercenaries. And they had arrived in Aceh ready to fight for the Muslim cause. Not only that, later, Fernão Mendes Pinto, he was also informed that additional Turkish forces that consisted of some 300 soldiers had arrived in Aceh, and that the Achenese Sultan had signed a military and commercial pact in Cairo, Egypt, with the Grand Turk, the Suleiman the Magnificent, through the Pasha of the Egypt. Well, I will try to resume. It's not necessary to provide further accounts on subsequent relations between the Achenese and the Ottomans. What is clear is that the race between Muslims and Christians was evidently there, mostly, of course, involving trade and politics, but clearly also religion. And it is also clear that the Portuguese had almost no chance to spread the Christianity. Well, I have some maps. We can compare the spread of the Islam in Southeast Asia, for example, and comparing with the spread of the Christianity. Was evident. So what is clear is that the race between Muslims and Christians was evidently there, mostly, of course, involving trading, politics, and religion. And it is also clear that the Portuguese had almost no chance to spread Christianity, excepting in Malacca, where the Portuguese were able to put down some trace of Christianity, or in some missions in Solor, Flores, Timor, and some isolated islands where they will be defeated, like Ambon, Tidor, Ternate. More than that, the Portuguese fairly soon ceased to be such a revolutionary force in the west of the archipelago, and it is also evident that they failed to control the Asian trade. Well, to conclude, I have lots of topics, but I know my time. Well, it's a story of the Western greed and support. Yes. As Reid concludes, the Portuguese period was a period during which polarization and religious boundaries were clearly drawn. Only by the mid-17th century was this sharp distinction between Islam and non-Islam fading. There is no doubt that the religious factor was evident in the contest for the Eastern Archipelago. Both Milling, Roelofs, and Reid conclude that the coming of the Portuguese and the Spaniards had intensified the religious race between Muslims and Christians. As Reid maintains, in Eastern Indonesia, as whole Muslims and Christians were most on a par in the mid-16th centuries, but the unstable modus vivendi between Portuguese and the sultanates of Ternate and so, well, create disturbs and create division. And with the story of the Sultan Babula of Ternate, for example, Babula, we can, the alliances and the changes, the modifications, the Moluccans, for example, they will be on the side of the Muslim because the Muslim appears more unified than the Christianity. Well, with a lots of aspects to underline my speech, I have to thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for the interruptions. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Thank you so very much for the interesting insight and knowledge that actually we got according to the presentation from Prof. Vitor. Well, because I've noticed that there are some history students and historians as well. Studies about conversion, as you mentioned, Professor, and maybe other religion history in Southeast Asia during the 17th centuries until 16th to 17th centuries have usually relied on fragmentary languages, so that our historian, especially history students at Undip, at Universitas Diponegoro, they are difficult to get the point what is actually can be researched to be studied according to the certain period on that period, because they have difficulties on the language due to some references that we've got or that we get in Indonesia, dominantly in European language, Dutch and English, or maybe Portuguese. So we should master several languages, foreign languages, to write historiography in the period of 16th to 17th centuries. So that's why that period is quite challenging for historians, for history students at Undip to be researched and to be studied. Yeah, I think, of course, there are so many concerns from the audiences, especially for the historian, for the students of history. But please save your questions because we are moving to the next speaker, Prof. Sarjit. Prof. Sarjit will talk about cultural preservation through information and communication technology in Malaysia. Prof. Sarjit, I think that you will deliver a presentation and share your own PowerPoint, or should us help you to share the PowerPoint?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
May I start
Prof.
now?
Sarjit. Yes, of course, Prof. Sarjit.
All right. Good afternoon from Malaysia. Distinguished speaker, Professor Vitor, scholars, Indonesian scholars, Professor Alam Shah, Dr. Ibu Nur Hayati, Dean Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Diponegoro, students, and of course, I do have a friend, Dr. Tuku Afrizal from Undip. I'm so happy to be here because of course, I've been to Indonesia many times, and I also history is one of my favorite subjects, especially Indonesian history and Philippine history. But my major was in anthropology. When I studied at UKM, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, I did some work on basically on Candi Borobudur as for my assignment to see how cultural preservation was done on Candi and so on. Well, my talk is basically, I would like to share my slide here. I've revised my slide. Yes. Okay, can you see the slide?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. This is the topic, basically looking at cultural preservation through ICT in Malaysia. And I think that this similar study can be done also in Indonesia as well. I do have students from Indonesia for S1, undergraduates at the moment. Every semester I have students from Jakarta, mainly from Jakarta, Indonesia. So whenever they come to me, I always ask them to do something on culture and preservation looking at Indonesia. So this is the learning outcome, looking at the meaning of culture, the type of culture, and why do we need to preserve the culture in terms of cultural preservation, and why culture is important in our everyday life, and also with the rapid development that we have, not just in Jakarta but also in Kuala Lumpur, and we can see a lot of development has been discussed and debated. Next is on information, communication, and technology. Some relevant issues of ICT development. Basically, looking at this digital divide between rural urban areas, interior areas, where my study focuses a lot on some of the poor states in Malaysia. For example, like Sabah, one of the poor states in Malaysia. Therefore, I want to know what's happening there, looking at to what extent that society are taking seriously on the impact of ICT and how can they preserve their own culture. These are the number 3 is the research is basically funded by multimedia, Malaysian Multimedia Corporation, Commission. In Malaysia, in Malay, we call Suruhanjaya Komunikasi dan Multimedia. I'm sure in Indonesia you also have the commission on the multimedia. So if you look at the culture, basically at the concept, as we know that culture is something that you and me, we try to preserve the culture. We want to make sure that our young people understand the culture and how can we transmit this culture to another generation. So the socialization process has also has a different meaning now, because we don't see much socialization process is taking place in our family institution. Now people are using ICT to transmit, to share the knowledge of culture to young generation. So we can see culture as we understood. It's a broad concept that encompasses of all the way of life, behavior, philosophy, ethics, customs, manner, morals, morality, tradition, belief system, political, economic, and all other activities that we understood as culture. And of course, culture and society, that we also have religion in this context. We talk about culture, religion, and belief system, and all these are interconnected, connected with our society. We do have many society in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and we can see that in Malaysia that we also have many society that we have from, like, for example, Minangkabau, the Bugis, and also there are many sub-ethnic of Malays, for example. And of course, if you study culture, you know that basically there are material culture and non-material culture. Material culture that are tangible things that you can see that that's been practiced by our society. For example, like the Malay weddings, for example. I'm not sure in Indonesia, do you still play kompang during the wedding? You know the kompang, the instrument?
Oh, really?
Yeah, so when you go to the wedding, you can see the people are using, playing with the kompang when the bride and groom want to meet and so on, right? But now, if in Kuala Lumpur, you don't see this is happening. People no longer play kompang, but this kompang has been digitalized, has been put into, before this was CD-ROM, and now you can see from YouTube, you can listen to YouTube, the kompang, they can play that, so that you don't have to pay, you don't have to get people to gather and to spend money. So everything has been digitalized in terms of technology. So this is of course, technology is part of culture. And then if you look at non-material culture, for example, if you talk about culture, when you talk about language, norms, value, belief systems, morals, and so on. So these are tangible and intangible culture. So the question here is, why do we need to preserve our culture? Why is it important? Right? So culture and its heritage reflect and shape our value system, our belief system, and also aspirations and towards how do we define, for example, a national identity. So like in Indonesia, uh, people in Indonesia, they have a very strong national identity, kind of bangsa Indonesia, for example, because of your Pancasila, tradition of Pancasila, notion of Pancasila has also give a very significant in terms of projecting a national identity. Of course, in Malaysia, we do have the concept of Bangsa Malaysia as well. And also we have Rukun Negara, similar as we have Indonesia or Pancasila. So the value of intangible cultural heritage is not in the cultural manifestation itself, but also the wealth of knowledge. So how do we gain this knowledge? How do we learn all this from our parents, from the grandparents in our society? How do we transmit this knowledge? Not just knowledge, but also skills to young people so that we can preserve this culture. So these are the reason why, the reason of having this study is because looking at to what extent the older generation are transmitting their cultural knowledge and skills to young generation, to the youth, for example. So when you study culture, of course, we know that there are some characteristics of culture. That is, we have many types of characteristics of culture. It's a pattern behavior. We learn culture. It's been learned through the process of socialization from one generation, transmitted from the very beginning when we were young, for example, by parents, from extended family, nuclear family, and so on. And of course, culture is shared by the members of the society. If you participate in the societal activities, programs, you can see how important is the senior members of the society that took very important aspect of giving information, sharing knowledge to young people about values, for example, about language. So this is what is important for us, for the young people to know. And of course, culture is something dynamic. It's always changing. It's not very, it's not fixed, but it's changed over the time. And if you can see the impact of, for example, the impact of Korean movies, Korean drama, Korean movies towards the formation of Muslim identity. I read a thesis from Brunei University, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, a PhD thesis from Brunei University, studying about the impact of Korean drama towards Muslim identity in Indonesia. So I was the examiner. So I was surprised. Malaysia and Indonesian Muslim society has very much interested to know about Korean culture. All right. So this is something that I want to know. How can, of course, we learn about other culture. The culture is important. That we need to preserve our culture, and we must also embrace and appreciate other culture. That where do we live in one area or one society, for example. Like Indonesia, there's so many diverse group of society, for example. Over the population of 270 million population. You cannot compare with Malaysia. We are only 32 million. So in terms of that, of course, Malaysia respect Indonesia as our brothers of ASEAN community and so on. So we borrow a lot of things from Indonesia, and of course we celebrate, we enjoy this diverse exchange, cultural background, identity, and so on. And of course, culture is varies from societies to another society. Where, to me, what's important is how can we learn from other cultures? And of course, another important characteristic of culture is integrated with our religious understanding. So why culture is important? As rightly said by Mahatma Gandhi, nation culture reside in our hearts and also in the soul of the people. So therefore, we need to know what is the identity, for example, Indonesian identity, cultural identity, Malaysian identity. We need to understand the notion of identity. So, but what's happening when we look at this development, we have not just the global perspective, but also the regional perspective, and also at local level in Malaysia, Indonesia, we can see a lot of developments have neglected the human factors. We have not really focused a lot on understanding about other culture. I give example because Professor Vitor talked about Portuguese community. Let me share you a little bit on this Portuguese community in Malacca. I've done some work many years ago on this community. The Portuguese community in Malacca is basically about 500 to 600 of them living in one area in Malacca city. And majority, 60 to 70% of this community are basically, they are fishermen. They're involved in the fishery activities and economic activities and so on. And if you look at this community, they are so, they are very much together in terms of maintaining, in terms of solidarity of this group. They maintain their Portuguese identity and the celebration of the Christmas, celebration of the San Pedro, all these festivals that we have in Portuguese. And we can see that the senior group, the senior members are also facing some difficulty to transmit the knowledge and identity of their culture to the young people because of the intermarriages has taken place. Intermarriages has taken place in the society. So the Portuguese community in Malacca are very special because they are small in terms of number, and the state government is supporting them in terms of giving a lot of support. For example, in terms of maintaining their cultural identity, projecting their museum. They have their own museum. So the beauty of this ethnic minority in Malaysia, we have our own museum, our ethnic museum. So this is what important, because museum is, see, when I travel to Indonesia or when I travel to Thailand and other countries, I want to visit the museum, because from the museum you understand the culture, you understand the history, you understand the heritage. So to me, museum is very important, so that we need to. But the best museum that you want to see is the museum in Singapore. Their museum is all digitalized, digital museum. If you go to Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, our museum is still being with the artifacts, it's still old museum. So we need to, how do we make a museum like a digital museum that everybody can use? You don't have to go to the museum, but you can just Google it here. Then you can see all these artifacts, the culture, the heritage, the history. So we have an issue here on looking at development, culture and development. We cannot just deny culture because we want to develop the country, the state, the areas, the localities, and so on. So what's happening in our country, Malaysia, basically is in terms of community development. We look at community development programs. We make a lot of development without asking the community what kind of development do you want, for example. So, and to some extent, we have neglected their cultural understanding, their cultural knowledge, their heritage when we develop society. So this is what happened in many societies, that with the advancement of technology, culture is not given a priority to some areas or to some communities. So this has been given a lot of impact, especially to young generation. So how do we transmit all this? the transmission of one culture to one generation. Of course, with the advancement of technology is important. So, according to King, the traditional culture is not necessarily as an impediment to change, but it's all sometimes succumb to modernity because of modernization taking place. People don't value culture. People do not want to know about other cultural knowledge, and we sometimes we tend to disrespect other culture. So this is what technology play important role for us to understand other culture. So if you look about technology, we can see that a lot of changes has taken place, how people communicate. So no longer using, I don't see people are using, in my office, I don't have a telephone in the office. We have no longer have a phone in the office. Everything is connected to the mobile phone, right? So of course, the teaching of this, during the COVID, everything has changed. Online teaching has taken place over the last 2 years, over the last 1.5 years now, and we are also giving lecture through online. So technology is important, but the problem here is what kind of technology, right? And to what extent that the people benefit from the technology. Not everyone is benefiting from technology because of some of them are living in the rural areas, some of them live in the interior, so deep inside, and the technologies has not been given rightly to the people. So has technology evolved beyond our control? We can see that, of course, technology has been shaped by us. The technologies has been developed by human for the purpose of human, and to some extent, we have basically evolved in terms of using technology. So we are moving Indonesia, Malaysia. If you go to Singapore, you can see a lot of development has taken place. I've traveled to many countries in Southeast Asia, except for Myanmar. I've not been to Myanmar, so I can see in terms of digital divide gaps between some countries in ASEAN. So these are the latest statistics of digital around the world. You can see the population in the world is about 7.83 billion. So the urbanization area, if you see, is only about 56%, 56.4%. Those in the urbanized area, they are urban people. Therefore, they benefit from the technology. So not many people are benefiting from technology in terms of because of the gaps, geographical areas, and so on. So in terms of internet user, for example, 4.6 billion, 4.66 billion. It's about 60% of people are using internet. So we can see that 40% of world population are not using that. So we can see there's some gaps here. So therefore, it's important to study this community. I have made some comparative information here between Indonesia and Malaysia, looking at the digital development of technology. If you look at Indonesia, for example, infrastructure and access in terms of network coverage is consistently about 98%. But if you look at on the mobile phone ownership, is about only 63%. Meaning to say that about 37% people do not use mobile phone in terms of ownership. Okay, let's look on Malaysia, for example. If we compare with Indonesia, in terms of infrastructure, Malaysia is a bit below than not so bad as compared to Indonesia is the leading in terms of infrastructure development and accessibility. But in terms of ownership, you can see that 96% of Malaysians own mobile phone, for example, technology, internet. So you can see Indonesia, in terms of female mobile phone ownership, is only about 58%. Male is 68%. Right? Now you look on Malaysia, right? Male and female is almost there, almost 95 and 98%. So we can see in terms of the usage, the adoption of ICT is very much ahead than if you see it compared to other countries. So you can see the number of coverage is good, but in reality, let's look on social reality here. We have a problem here in Malaysia. Looking at UMS is one of the university in Sabah. If you understand Sabah, you see in Kalimantan. Kalimantan is here in Borneo. You have Kalimantan, you have Brunei, you have Sarawak and Sabah. Sabah is basically next to Indonesia, border to Indonesia. UMS students had a problem of using ICT. Therefore, she had to go to the next level, to very high area, and she had to climb on the tree to get the connectivity in terms of using internet. So we have an issue here. So that was the reason why we conducted this study. Before we found this issue. Before this issue was last year, right? So we found it much earlier in 2017, 2018. This research was conducted. Basically, we have seen in terms of rural development. But if you go to Kota Kinabalu in Sabah, there's a lot of development there in terms of physical development, in terms of the development of localities, areas, everything. Very much advanced. Almost same like the Kuala Lumpur. But if you go to the rural area, when you go to the interior area, we find this gap, these digital issues, digital divide issues. So what I'm going to share here basically is the research was conducted in 2017 and 18. It's about 2 years research, and we discovered many issues. So these are the empirical research, and we have focused basically on the 8 ethnic minorities, indigenous people, and I'm sure some of you have basically known about this group. The Kadazan Dusun in Penampang area, Bajau in Kota Bulut, and Sampurna. Sampurna is just border to Indonesia. It's very near. And then Murut in Keningau, Rungus, Kedayan, Lundaye. Lundaye is Long Pasir. This is a very interior area that I've been here. From the Sipitang to Long Pasir, it took about 4 hours drive, using 4-wheel drive. And Long Pasir is just a border to Kalimantan. It's border in the Indonesia border. It's Indonesia border. And of course, one of the ethnic groups is Melayu Brunei, in Beaufort, Papar, and of course Suluk in Sampurna. So there's a gap between this community. From the finding, we discovered that the Kadazan Dusun and the Bajau and the Melayu Brunei have a high level of adoption. They are basically well exposed in terms of technology. Their acceptance is very high. They don't face a lot of problem as been faced by other ethnics such as the Murut, the Rungus, the Lundaye, and Suluk. Of course, the Lundaye is far interior. I will show you all this empirical evidence later. You can see there's a gap here between the rural and the urban areas. So these are some narratives that we have basically collected during the interview. So basically, difficulty to access the internet, especially they live in the town area. But if you go to Sabah, there are quite a number of people in the rural area. They go to the clinic. They go to the clinic not to visit the doctor, not to meet the doctor. They go to the clinic because to get the free internet access. So it's interesting, eh? So the people in the rural area, they visit the clinic just to get the free ICT accessibility. So because of the area, they do not have this what they call this technology, ICT and so on. But they have one Malaysia, one internet community center in Sabah. They have about 331 internet community center developed by the government, established by the government, so that the people can access the internet for free in that area. But it's not been it has not been given a proper coverage to many areas. It's only selected areas, right? If you're a politician, if Naili, you are a politician in one area, therefore you are able to get a few internet area, center in your area. So this has become a political issue as well. So development is also still been based by political development. If you don't support me, I don't give you development. So these are the problems that we face. I'm not sure in Indonesia, do you still have this problem? Development is based on political support. If you support the party, you will get the development kind of facility. So in terms of the development, of course, some of these older people that we interview, we divided into three groups: elderly group, women, and also young people. The elderly group, they really want the technology. They want to adopt this. They want, what is the problem that they face was they do not have knowledge in terms of using the technology. They have the knowledge of culture because they practice the culture. What they want is, if they said, if we are given a proper training to use this mobile phone, this laptop, the government give them also a laptop and computers, but they do not know how to use. So because of that, they do not know how to use, they sell the laptop, they sell the computers to other people because of they do not have the knowledge. So poor ICT knowledge and awareness among the elderly has become a gap. So we should train them. By right, in the internet center, in the 331 that we have in Sabah, which has been established by the government, this center should have trained the elderly group in terms of understanding ICT. From there, they can use this to transmit the knowledge of culture to the young people. So you can see this narrative. Some older people also share the narrative. Most of them they use for entertainment. Some of them they use to learn music. Some of them they want to invite their friends for wedding. They use ICT. They send information and so on. So how do they maintain the culture? Basically, they use this technology, especially among the young people. They benefit this. They enjoy this. They learn the culture from this technology. And whatever, they also develop their own YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel, they share about their rituals. They share about their wedding culture. They share about their religious rite. When one of the elders pass away in the society, so they conduct their rituals. They share in the via videos. They make videos and they share the WhatsApp group and so on. So to me, this is one of the way that how technology is very useful for them to transmit, to share their culture, so that their culture could be preserved, so that even though we have modernization, but the culture can be preserved when we understand the technology, when we know how to use technology. So what do? They promote their culture by uploading videos, right? Some teachers in the school, they learn the language from the young generation. They transmit the language in terms of vocabularies. Some of the elderly group, what they do is they teach language in the WhatsApp group, for example. So for example, they use the word in animal. Let's say this animal, what is the animal name in their own language, in the Rungus language, in the Suluk language, the Bajau language, and so on. So these are the important aspect that we can use this, the WhatsApp group, so that the elderly people can share about the rituals, about the do and don'ts, about whatever cultural knowledge they have. So the YouTube is important to them. The music, the language, and so on. And the dance, the dance, the meaning of the dance, and then the dance they show their clothing. And then when they have a celebration of Keamatan, for example, the Keamatan celebration and the Gawai Keamatan they share in the groups. So when they have this knowledge, and then I can see that the women the women group are so active in terms of sharing this information to develop their their groups, and also to get the young people to participate in their cultural sharing knowledge in terms of using ICT. And also the wedding card, for example. This one of the group that they, of course, the Bajau community feel that within the own family, you need to give the wedding cards. In many society now, the wedding cards become irrelevant. I'm not sure in Indonesia. Now they don't have a wedding card. They call a digital wedding card. Everything has been disseminated through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through Instagram, through Telegram, and so on. So unlike during my time, when I got married 20 years ago, we must send a wedding card from to our relative from home to home. You cannot just post the wedding card. You must give to the family members. Nowadays, you don't have to give that. Nowadays, you just post in the family WhatsApp group the wedding card so that they can participate, they can attend. So this technology has basically given another opportunity for people to send the wedding invitation openly and also you can save your time. You don't have to travel, because from one area to one area you need to travel to give a wedding card. That take a lot of time, cost, and so on. And of course, to some older people, they become sensitive because for them, wedding card must be given directly to their own family member by hand, for example. So these are the issues that it's interesting to see the acceptance level of the older people and the younger people have different understanding, different acceptance in terms of technology. Well, this is the fieldwork photos that we have in Kudat, in the Rungus community. Of course, in our culture, when we meet them, we need to meet the local village leader, community leaders to get their blessing, so that we can meet the right people to interview and so on. So these are the Kudat, and this is the Long Pasir. Long Pasir took us for 4 hours to go in because it's very interior, and you can see the photos here. So there's a Christian. Majority of them are Christian here, and see, when we attended the church, this is the church, the Christian church here in the Long Pasir. We attended the sermon. We sat down behind. So they use a mobile phone to recite the hymns, to recite the sacred hymns and so on during the rituals, the prayers and so on. To me, that is very interesting. So some of the older people I saw, they use Bible. Majority of the young people, they use a digital Bible that they downloaded and kept in the mobile phone. So I observe these two situations. But the older people, they brought their own Bible. They sit down, they open the Bible. But the younger one, they bring everything has all been downloaded in their digital mobile phone and so on. So to me, that is one of the very interesting observations that I found in this interior. Of course, this is the area that we went. Of course, the journey, of course, it's very deep inside. There's no proper road here. It took us about 4 hours to go in the community here. So this is the journey that we had. Okay, this is another school that we have an issue in this school. Basically, so sorry, this one. Yes, this is in Keningau. This is the school that we visited the school. I want to know, when I study a culture, I study society, I want to see the impact in the nearby area. For example, the school. Unfortunately, when we visited the school, all these computers are there, but it's not working. It's all it cannot be used anymore. So this is the sad situation that we have in the school. So of course, I have also complained to the authority that we have to give a proper facilities of technology to the school. If you want them to, if you want to bring them advanced in terms of knowledge, you have to give a right digital assets and so on. Okay? So this is the problem that we have in the school. And of course, this is in Mabul. It's a very nice island in Sampurna, very near to what they call this in Indonesia as well. So unfortunately, in this school, they don't even have a computer lab. They don't even have a science lab. So these are the group that people that when I participate in this group, I want to get to know them about technology, about their understanding. Of course, some of them, some of the students, they use their parents' mobile phone. They want to know about other people, culture, and so on. But unfortunately, in this school, they do not have a computer science lab. They don't have a science lab. So this is the gap that I can see that we have in the rural and urban areas. So because the development has been highly focused in the urban setting, has not been taken seriously in the rural areas. So as a conclusion, we can see that a culture is an individual way of life in which each individual inherit through our heritage, through our socialization process, and so that we can preserve our identity. We can learn about other identity as well. Like in Indonesia, we have so many cultural identities that we need to know. Like my community in Indonesia, the Sikh community, they have basically in Medan, in Jakarta. I was told just now Surabaya. It's interesting to see how they preserve their identity, like how I preserve my own identity in Malaysia. So this is how the impact of technology is also important, so that we can disseminate information about culture, so that people know about other culture, and we respect. We must respect other people's culture and religion. Any development process that takes place must consider cultural aspect. Whatever development that we want to do, we need to understand society. We need to understand their cultural understanding and background, so that we do not do something that is against people, culture, knowledge, and so on. If it's used properly and optimized, the ICT can be a useful tool for cultural preservation. And I've seen this in my earlier research. I've started from doing research on Orang Asli in Peninsula, and then I've extended my research to the minorities acceptance in among the Portuguese community, among the Chetty community, among the Orang Asli community, before I extended my study to Sabah. So I've started this from 2008 until today. I've studied on ICT and cultural preservation. So I can see the acceptance level is very good, but the problem is the digital divide issue is still there and has not been taken seriously by the authorities and some stakeholders. So despite the fact that ICT play important role in human daily life, some people are still being denied to get the access. This is where we need to narrow down the divide, the digital divide. We need to give better development to the other community as well. So the indigenous people of Sabah are dedicated. They are very much interested to preserve their culture, their cultural knowledge, and so on. But the government should collaborate. To me, the government must collaborate. This is my advice to the government of Malaysia. Of course, Malaysia want to develop. I do not know about how Orang Rimba in Jambi. I've read a thesis about Orang Rimba in Jambi, PhD thesis from USM. I was the external examiner. I've examined quite a number of theses for Indonesia University. Not from Indonesia University, other university that doing work in Indonesia. So I know basically it's important for us to collaborate with the society, the community, to improve the connectivity, accessibility, as well as to channel appropriate ICT training skills to the community, especially to the older generation. They want to know. They want to know the technology. We should not just sideline this group, because they want to embrace this technology so that they can impart the values, knowledge, cultural knowledge to the young people. So with that, I thank you very much to all for giving me the time to present my research findings to all of you. Thank you to Ibu Noor.
Well, terima kasih. Thank you very much to Prof. Sarjit for sharing the experience and knowledge related what you have been done in Sabah and in your research. I've noticed that Yeah, it's. I agree that Indonesia is too many diverse community. So that's why we have so many homeworks if we are talking about the cultural preservation, because it should be belongs to certain ethnic groups, right? And then because we have so many diverse communities, then we should thinking about the certain method, certain ways to preserve the certain cultural identity in the certain cultural ethnic groups. So it's a big challenging works for the community, for the government, because it is a big, yeah, it's quite difficult to it's a challenge, I think, but it's quite difficult to face that we have so many communities, and they have their own criteria, um, their own style, or maybe they are persistent with ICT, with technology. So this is a big problem that we face nowadays. Well, actually, this is very interesting topic to be discussed furthermore. I would like to ask for the audiences if there are maybe some questions proposed by the audience. You may ask the question directly by raise your hands button, or you may ask in the chat room. I've noticed that Prof. Vitor already answered the question from the audience. It's about the period of the Indonesian history in 16th to 17th century. Well, yeah, we have students here, Dewi Afriani Lubis, that have raised her hands. Dewi, please ask question directly to whom that you want to ask the questions.
You may ask me in Bahasa Indonesia. I speak Bahasa Melayu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please, Dewi.
Oh, she can unmute.
She can unmute. Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Udah kedengeran ya, Ibu?
Sudah.
Oke. Mau pakai bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris aja, Ibu?
Boleh, silakan. Bahasa Inggris boleh.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm sorry I cannot turn on my camera because I got some trouble in my phone. For Professor Vitor, I want to ask that why Portuguese choose violence to spread Christianity in archipelago, and who have a big major role to spread Christianity in archipelago. So yeah, thank you, and I hope you understand my question.
Clearly.
Yeah, I think it's clear. It's clear for a question from Dewi.
Terima kasih,
do you want to answer directly, Prof. Vitor?
Yes, if I may.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. The goal of my presentation was focused on to try to clarify about an old theory talking about a dispute as a race. Well, many people, they think that the Islam became running to convert the Hinduist people majorly in the archipelago. And suddenly the Christians, the Portuguese, the Kafir, they conquered, and they were settled in Malacca, in the Malay Peninsula, where they left until today, as Professor Sarjit Gill talked very well and very clear about the Portuguese Cristang in Malacca. And we have another cultural approaches in Borneo, for example, with the Dayak people. We have our skulls there in the shrines of the Dayak, in the Kalimantan, the Sabah, in the areas where the Dayak they are settled until today. And even in Georgetown, in Penang, in Singapore, for example, in Indonesia, in Jakarta, in Tugu, a district in the capital. Well, the Portuguese, they tried to spread the Christianity also in pair of the economic and political and military approach, because it was very important, the ideal of crusade. Yes, the ideal to spread the conversion to the Catholic, to still to have the medieval idea of the Christendom. It was like a herd guided by the Pope, like the wall of the Christians. They have to recover the Holy Lands, the place where Jesus was born, and we start to have a conflict between the Europe and the Muslim, the occupation of the Jerusalem, for example. And later we open a seaborne empire centered in the Indian Ocean. We connect to the South China Sea through Malacca, and we have an extension to Moluccas. From Malacca, we try to convert the people of the archipelago. In Sumatra, it was very difficult. Like in the Malay Peninsula, we were an enclave. We were a unique city surrounded by the Muslim sultanates. And we have to think that in Malacca, we rule a people of Gujaratis, of Javanese, Sumatris, of elsewhere, Chinese, from many parts of Southeast Asia. We encountered a multi-ethnic and multi-religious spot with a diversity different than what we find in Europe, uniquely Christian. Well, until the 16th century, when we became divided in Protestants, Calvinists, Lutherans, and so. As you will experiment with the Dutch occupation later. But the Portuguese, they tried, like the Spanish, they were called the champions of the Christianity by the popes. And they swear to the Pope that they will extend the Christian faith all over the world. With, I'm sorry, the expression, many Portuguese they don't like, but in a hand they were a cross, in another hand they were the sword, and in the pockets the money. They want to travel, they want to trade, they want to convert, they want to rule. It was a European perspective, but they never did a race. Well, they became later the merchants from Arabia, from Yemen, from Gujarati, from Persia, from elsewhere. They were settled here. And the single men, they married with the people, and they converted, and they offered a different response to their problems, and they offered unity. The Christians, they offered division, they offered rivalry. Saint Francis Xavier, many people, they claim that he baptized thousands and thousands of people, but these thousands and thousands of people, mainly in Moluccas, they rapidly they converted to the Islam later. When he ran away to the China and Japan, the people, they became Muslim because the Muslims, they offer, well, a cultural opportunity, economic and social stability through the marriage, through the constitution of the family, through the responses of their aims and their wishes and their worries. The Christians, they have different paths. The Dominicans, they used a medieval concept of the spiritual conquerage, the spiritual conquest. They imposed the Christian rule. The Jesuits, they accommodate, but even the accommodation, they observe the rituals, they observe the languages, they preach in Malay, in the dialects of the Malay. They try to know the sources. For example, in India, the father Nobili, he dressed as a guru and he preach in Sanskrit. In Hindi, well, the dialects Gujarati, Mahabharata, Konkani, they used to talk in the Indian native languages, like in Japan, like in China. Well, this offended the European or the Eurocentric perspective based on the Latin and the vulgar languages, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and so. But the Jesuits, they no, we have to know the customs, we have to know the traditions, and we have to talk, to preach, and to pray in their languages. Well, but these efforts, they were in alliances of the survival of the trade routes. They were, well, the importance and of the trade and the money of the and the rule, the political imposition, they were strongest than the faith, and the faith was accompanied by this desire of occupation. Well, you can see that they replaced domination by another domination, and suddenly appeared another from Europe. The people was fighting since centuries, the Muslims in Europe, in Northern Africa, in the Middle East, and suddenly they came with a cross and a sword hidden on the backs many times, and they killed. It's not very welcome in my country to talk about these aspects of the history. We attacked the Hajj pilgrims. We tried to conquer Mecca. We only failed on the Red Sea, but we destroyed many spots in Arabian Peninsula and Persia. And people, for example, represented for Ratu Kenkana, the Queen Kalinyamat, she was the face of people that they choose the Islam, because the Islam was more popular and attended not to the elites, but to the whole of the people. It was the cultural approach of the Islam in the islands was more efficient than the elitism and of the cultural, the Christianity approaching. And what we did in Malacca, what we did in the Indian Ocean, it was not very good and at the eyes of the people. But, well, different strategies in order for a unique faith. Division, it's not very welcome if we want to spread a faith. We can have lots of gods, for example, but we follow a unique faith. But if we have a faith with different perspectives and even rivalries faced or hidden on the political alliances, well, it's not very good for a people who wants to try different perspectives. We use different methods. In Flores, we can convert it until today. In Timor is Timor. In some areas in the Indonesia archipelago, but the real Catholic spread, it was before the action of the Father Van Lith, Jesuit, Dutch Jesuit in 19th and 20th century, and Catholics from Netherlands, they began to spread the majority, for example, of the Catholics, even the Protestants. If you go to Sulawesi, sorry, it's a very interesting spot because Sulawesi, they converted Manado, Makassar to the Christianism. And when the Portuguese, they were defeated, they replaced for the Calvinism of the Dutch colonial power. And they still to be majorly Calvinist there. And they once upon a time, they were Catholics, Popists. Only in Flores, on Sulor, East Timor, they still to be the Catholics of the first generation. And they were, and they are, well, hundreds of thousands, nothing more than this, because they still to follow a tradition centered on the Portuguese colony of East Timor. Okay, but the majority of the Christians, they were converted to the Calvinism of the Dutch. I hope I answered to your question. What I tried in my exposition, it was to clarify about an old theory, a classic theory, in a historical approach to we can see clearly about what is the real history, the rivalry in the past between Portuguese and Muslims from elsewhere, but unified by the Sunni tradition, as you know better than me, of course, in the Islam, in the Ummah, and the development until the Dutch occupation and the defeat, if you want, in the islands of the archipelago. It's a defeat because it was a mix of military power, political and economic power, and religion. If only was religion, like in, well, the Portuguese, they never used the unique way of the religion. We always mixed it with the material powers, and we used religion as a soft power 500 years ago.
Okay.
Thank you. Terima
Thank you.
kasih.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Peter. And can I ask one more question?
Sure.
About the person who spread the Christianity. Is it a priest or the trader who spread this Christianity?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear clearly. Could
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, repeat, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
About the person who spread the Christianity, is it a priest or a trader who spread Christianity?
Yeah. They were priests, mainly priests. But the difference is that if we put ourselves in a perspective of tabula rasa, if we see the priests, they come dressed black and white, some ones, the Dominicans, another one black, and another one brown. And you, if you think you are a native of an island of the archipelago, what seems to you this? They talk about the same in different perspectives. They talk with a translator, interpreter, and they dress different colors. What you think if you are not European or accustomed with this? Culturally, it's diversity. Well, they dress different colors. It's different than Sunni or Shia, okay? It's different than the Muslim branches. The Muslims, instead, they preached with familiar context. The merchants, the traders, the husbands, the wives, the siblings, the strategy of the Muslims spreading, it was more popular, more familiar. They respond directly on the ground, on the soil. The Christians, they appeared with praise in Latin, translated. The first translators, the first interpreters, they were native with some knowledge about the Western languages. The translations, they were not very good and they failed. Only the Jesuits, but they have to wait decades to learn correctly, and to think, to dream, and to preach, and to talk in the native languages of the archipelago. But when they became able to this, the Portuguese military, they were defeated, and they have to run away from the archipelago, and they appeared the VOC, the Dutch rule. Imagine if you have to commemorate, to celebrate the Holy Mass in Latin. You know what is Latin? I can understand Bahasa Indonesia, but the majority of the people in Portugal, perhaps they will not understand. Who can talk Latin? And you have to know Latin, and they will preach in Latin. The proximity, for example, the Portuguese of Malacca, the Cristang, they converted by questions of integrations. Many of them, they are slaves or servants or fishermen. They were not a social integration, a complete social integration. They opted to be Christians to be free, for example. This was not a problem in Indonesia because the spread of the Christians reveals divisions, and the strategies, the accommodation of the Jesuits were late and inefficient in time and historical approach, because they were not the soldiers, they were not the power. For example, in Solor, the Dominicans, the priests of the Holy Inquisition in Europe, they defended the truth of the Gospels, the truth of the Bible. The Bible in Latin was unreadable for the people of the archipelago, and it was explained in the different languages and translated by people learning these languages. What is the result of this? It's very failed. The process of transmission, of communication, it's interrupted by the difficulties of the languages and the traditions and the customs. They never observed the identity of the peoples. Anthropologically, culturally, we have to know that, for example, in Japan, in China, the Jesuits, they observed, they studied first, and they acted later. These guys, with all my respect, of course, they came from Malacca. They were the captains of Solor, the military commanders, they were friars, trying to convert, and at the same time imposing the military power, the rule of domination of Portuguese. The Muslims, they appeared, they were merchants, and they, at their homes, they talk about the prophet, they talk about the Quran, they talk about the freedom. You don't have to wear something different to be a Muslim. Well, to be a mullah or you have, what's the difference in the mosque? We have some little difference, but they are later than in this period. They have a promise of liberty, of freedom. they were the power of God. It's in the heart for the Muslims. In the Christians, it's extended to the heart. It's very difficult for people outside of the European continent to understand and follow this. It will be, we need that it could be very well explained to be understood. And difficulties of languages and the mix of the material power with the religion, they were a cocktail not very well come from these people. I'm sorry for the. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Vitor, for the answers. And we have another question from Yuta. Yuta 3.
Yeah, hello.
Okay.
Can you hear
Please
my voice?
ask directly the
Okay.
question to Prof. Vitor and maybe to Prof. Sarjit.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask a question for Prof. Victor. It's about the Christianity spread in Maluku, yeah, which is as I know that Saint Francis Xavier, he used local language to spread the Christianity. I mean, like to spread in this what in my opinion is like to preach, yeah, to tell. Is it to tell the gospel of God in the Bible? And I'd like to ask about this. In Catholic Church, we know that Latin language is the official language of the church, and Saint Francis used the local language. Is it a little bit unorthodox, which is like you said before that in another country that you said there is an inquisitor because the translation of the Bible. My question, is it permitted by the diocese that Saint Francis worked for? I mean, like, I think the church territory, I mean, the supervisor or the bishop that Saint Francis worked for. Can you get my question?
Yes, about the problem of the translations and the preaching in native languages and the example of Saint Francis Xavier. Well, I'm not sure, if you permit me, that in just an year, Saint Francis Xavier, he was a great man. He was very smart and intelligent, yes, indeed. But I'm not sure if he was direct preached in Ambonese, Ternatese, Tidores, Almahera, some, well, often the native dialects and idioms in Maluku and Moluccas. He was a Jesuit, but he belonged to the first generation of Jesuits that they came with the medieval idea of the spiritual contest. What means this? We have the right to, we have a divine right, a divine incumbence to preach in the name of God, in the language of the God, in Latin. We can preach in Spanish or Portuguese or English, but we can preach even to translate or use the translators in the native languages. But they used to preach a little bit of the Gospels, for instance, and they came to baptize, and he ran away from Moluccas. It was not the time. I'm studying Indonesian and classical Malay from 21, 22 years ago. I stopped many times, but I think it's very difficult in a couple of months or to learn a specific idiom of the Moluccas. And he left a community, but he ran away. Only after Matteo Ricci in China Lei Matao in Mandarin. He was a Jesuit. He developed the method of the accommodation. During 7 years, he was living in Macau, listening, learning, studying Chinese language, culture, Chinese traditions, religions. After this, he tried to dress as a Chinese scholar. And this was very important because he observed cultural mentalities of the Chinese to preach and to translate, because he knows to speak Chinese, to the people of China. In Indonesia, the first big efforts to translate this, they were during the Dutch colonial era. Because in the 16th century, the Portuguese, the Catholics at all, they were forbade to translate the Bible to the local national languages. It was a problem of the Reformation of Martin Luther. He asked to the Pope, I want to translate for German the Bible. Instead, they will never understand very well what the Bible says. And the Pope says no, because Latin is the language of the Bible. Well, it was the beginning of the Reformation and the separation. The Germans, they were very cult people with lots of culture, with more literacy. And they were a very important man, Johannes Gutenberg, the inventor of the press, to spread the writings and the Bibles for everybody. But they need to read in German, to listening the preachings in German, or in the German of the age of this epoch. St. Francis Xavier, a Jesuit, a very smart, very intelligent man. He was very good in the aspect of the human rights, but he was to be faithful to the commandments of Rome, preaching in Latin, or the basic was in Latin, and spread the Bible in Latin. It was completely forbade. If he translate the Bible to another language, he could be burned, I'm sorry, in the auto de fe. So he was an Orthodox in the sense of to keep the faith. So the first Bible in Portuguese, it's very interesting. The first Bible in Portuguese was translated by a Calvinist priest, a Calvinist shepherd, João Ferreira de Almeida. You know where? In Batavia, Jakarta. He was a Portuguese converted to the Calvinism, and he was lived in Jakarta under the Dutch rule, and he was the first translator to the Portuguese, the Bible of Ferreira de Almeida. You know this, in Indonesia, in your capital, it's very interesting. And the Portuguese, only in the 20th century, they accepted parts of the translation because it was a Protestant and it was made in the different sense of the Catholic Bible, because we have different translations of the Bible in order to the branch of the Catholicism. Branches and branches and branches, divisions and divisions and divisions. So, for example, Mr. Sajid is a Sikh. Since the Guru Nanak, the Sikhs, they are in a unique path. Well, with different observances perhaps, but the Sikhs still to be unique. A people, disciples, they have a unique branch. They don't have branches, they are the Sikhs. We, the Catholics, the Muslims, not so much, but we have different. And only in the 20th century, in 1967, we could pray the Mass in the national languages. We left the Latin, and this is very important. The translations of the Bible, they were forbade for centuries, for example. The preachings, the action of this man, it was very, very troubled by these questions, these Eurocentric questions. So just a idea. You know the word God. For you, the Muslims, Allah, Bismillah, okay? You have a unique word. Well, we have Deus, God, different words for God. But if you want to explain God in Javanese, in Sulawesi, in in one of your hundreds of languages and dialects, for example, to translate to God to Chinese, it was really difficult. Really difficult. The idea of God for a Chinese, a unique God, it's different than our idea. Well, it's different than the idea of the Jewish prophets. What kind of a unique God? The Muslims, they solved this problem very well. Allah is unique. Only one, the word Allah, Bismillah, is the unique in the whole of the world. The world. It's a problem, unknown and present. We cannot many times. We can imagine this. We can't imagine, but it's a really strong issue. The simple and the main concept. How we will explain this in a different language. If you explain this in Latin, the majority of the Catholics now, they will not understand. You have to translate, but when you are translating, you are losing and you are gaining and you are changing. And the Orthodox, perhaps they will say, no, it's not the right sense. But, well, we can imagine this and this and this and so and so and so. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No problem, bro. Thank you so much for the long explanation that responded to the question from Yuta. Well, we have question in the chat room. And I think this is important and interesting because I've known one of our students had been conducted research on the Sikh community, Prof. Sarjit in Jakarta. They asked about the Sikh community as a minority community in Southeast Asia, and then Prof. Sarjit answered yes. But the consideration as a minority itself should be clear now, because we actually, because if we have the term that minority is depend on the number of the ethnic groups or ethnic communities, it may be something that really that a little bit biased. So we would like to hear the experience from the Sikh community itself, from Prof. Sarjit, because one of our students had been conducting research in writing a biography of one of the athletes. In 1962, one of the athletes of Sikh community that coming from Jakarta, and he is the athlete of it's a national athlete, and he was competed some national and international competitions under the name of Indonesia. So if we are talking the national identity of this athlete, it's quite interesting because he was considered as Sikh community, as Sikh people, but somehow he has a tie with a national identity that belongs to Indonesian identity. So what do you think about it, Prof. Sarjit, as the member of the Sikh people in Southeast Asia, as that Sikh also become much more vulnerable, right, nowadays? And one of the questions from Aquas also asks that, is there any method to preserve the maybe religious identity or religious activity from the Sikh community with the help of ICT or technology and information communication?
Yes.
What do
Okay.
you think about it?
Thank you. But I like the question because it is about my PhD thesis
Oh,
on
really?
the role of Sikh Gurdwara in constructing the Sikh identity in Malaysia. So basically, this study can also be conducted the role of Gurdwara and the role of Gurdwara in constructing the Sikh identity in Indonesia, in Singapore, in Thailand, other countries as well. So basically, as we know about the Sikh, we need to know the Gurdwara, the Sikh temple, the institution. So this is where the institution play a significant role in maintaining Sikh identity. When I say Sikh identity, there's two identity. One is we are talking about collective identity. Another one we are talking about individual identity. And you are talking about national identity. Okay, so I'll come to the national identity later. So when you talk about the collective identity, we're basically talking about the Khalsa, those who are so-called the religious group, those who have been baptized and become a Khalsa. And the other one group is those who have not yet become a Khalsa. They are progressing slowly in their own pace. Because Sikh, the word Sikh, the meaning of Sikh is a learner, a student. So you learn as you grow, as you develop your time to grow, so that you learn about your religion, your language, and so on. So when I conducted my study in Kuala Lumpur, I stay. It was an ethnographic study. I did a comparative study between the Sikh in one of the Gurdwara in Kuala Lumpur, another Gurdwara in Sabah and Kota Kinabalu. So I stay 1 year. I'm an ethnographer. I stay 1 year in the temple in Kuala Lumpur, 6 months in the temple in Kota Kinabalu Gurdwara. So I can see my focus that time was basically I want to know from the community whether the Gurdwara is playing the right role or not. Whether the Gurdwara are they focused in their role in constructing the identity. So what I discovered in my PhD was there's another issue of Gurdwara has become a political institution. So you may read my work on Gurdwara and politics in Malaysia. Basically, it's a journal paper. So that become a controversial as well to some people that I critique a Gurdwara institution because they are supposed to play a religious role, but they are moving towards from religious to a political aspect because you cannot separate Gurdwara and politics as well. When we talk about identity, we talk about, when we talk about minority, we talk about two aspects of minority. One is a minority by ethnic, another one is minority by groups. For example, elderly group are basically a minority group. Women are minority group because of they do not have decision-making power and so on. So one aspect is disabled group, disabled people are minority groups, for example. So most of the Sikh basically are minority in Southeast Asia. If you go to Thailand, if you look at Indonesia. So the difference between Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia in terms of the Sikh identity is there's no difference. The difference is basically on the policy, the Thai policy, the Indonesian policy towards the society. I give you an example. In Indonesia, the Sikh in Indonesia, of course, they have their Sikh name, but they also have their own Indonesian name. Right? They also have Indonesian. If you go to Thailand, the Sikh, they have, for example, a Sarjit. Sarjit, name Sarjit Singh. They might have their Thai name as well, right? In Malaysia, I don't have a Malay name. So the practice of the policy is basically Indonesia and Thailand practice assimilation process, where the minority be assimilated to the majority culture. As in Malaysia, we don't have that. Malaysia practice integration, meaning in the sense that you have your own cultural identity, you practice that, and you are open basically to strengthen your own identity, collective identity, and so on. So until today in Indonesia, until today I'm speaking here, in Indonesia, the Sikh and Sikhism, Sikh religion has not been recognized as one of the religion in Indonesia because they are basically lumped under Hinduism.
Hinduism.
They have not been officially regarded as a separate religion. And Hinduism and Sikhism are two different religion. They are different. So when I go to Indonesia, I meet my friend Balwan Singh, the late Balwan, one of the key player, one of the community leader in Indonesia. You know, of course, sometimes he also asked me to raise this issue. Well, I say I can't raise the issue because I'm from Malaysia. But when I have a conference, I'll be able to raise the issue because they are a small minority as compared to Malaysia. We have about 100 to 120,000 of Sikh in Malaysia. The majority of them are professional group. Indonesia also professional, mostly are business people. The Sikh are the business community. You can see in Thailand, you can see in Malaysia, you can see in Indonesia. And also in Singapore, they also control the sports business industry. I'm sure you see the textile industry in Jakarta. They also controlled by these minority groups. So in terms of acceptance of ICT, they accepted ICT, and in the Gurdwara, in the Sikh temple, you can see the projectors whenever the Sikh preachers give a sermon. There be a translation of from the Gurmukhi and English, and then and some of them, like in Sabah, when I did my field work, they speak in the Bahasa Indonesia, Bahasa Melayu, Bahasa Melayu Sabah, and also Bahasa Indonesia. I've seen the Sikh in Indonesia when they come to Malaysia, they understand because we also speak Bahasa Melayu, Bahasa Indonesia in the Gurdwara and the Sikh temple. Of course, there's some senior people who are not happy because they speak. To me, Sikh, when Guru Nanak delivered the message, it's a message of universal religion, basically, message of peace, respect others, embrace diversity, and so on. So it's interesting to see Sikh in Indonesia are doing very well in terms of their identity formation because of the Gurdwara in Sumatra, Gurdwara in Tanjung Priok, and also in Jakarta and some other places. I've been to Surabaya, but I didn't get a time to visit the Surabaya Gurdwara. Hopefully one day if I come there, I might visit them.
Yes,
Oh,
a few information about Sikh community in Surabaya, Prof. Sarjit, actually. Well, we have also noticed that some political figures, such as the governor from Jakarta or other political figures, had certain or special visitations to Sikh community areas in Jakarta and Pasar Baru. Well, it is also noticed that in order to strengthening Sikh national identity, then some political figures or some efforts should be used because the strengthening purposes in the national identity. And we have also known during the President SBY in office, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono in office, that one of the presidential team experts is coming from Sikh people, Sikh community. So this is, I think this is interesting to be researched on by our students that have concerns regarding the minorities communities in Indonesia.
Yes, yes. I think they can do a research comparative study between the Sikh in Malaysia and Indonesia, because there's a lot of marriages between the Sikh in Malaysia and Sikh in Indonesia. You may not know this. I know some of my friends and some community leaders in Malaysia. Their children they're married with the Sikh in Indonesia. So that strengthen the relations, not just for the Sikh, but also in the context of ASEAN community kind of thing. So this is very interesting. Of course, there are many Sikh married in Singapore, Sikh in Indonesia married in Singapore, Sikh in Singapore married this one, but not many from Sikh from Malaysia marrying the Thailand. I think because of the language factor as well. Because of, like in Indonesia and Malaysia, Sikh marrying each other, there's no issue because we understand the Malay language, the Bahasa Indonesia. It's interesting.
Is it considered that Sikh community is exclusive community? Because I've heard it's just a rumor, but I've heard that one of the students that want to conducting research about the Sikh community, they are in student of history. They face difficulties to get along in the community, because it's about the topic, because the topic of the students is about the biography or the family history. So they need certain sources, especially the riwayat, or what is it?
History.
The history of the family. History of the family. Is it similar with the Arabs community, that they have a good abilities to preserve the information regarding the family history in the community?
I do not know why there's an issue of a difficulty to get, because the Sikh are very they are very open, and they love to help others. So I do not know. Maybe there's some, maybe in terms of communication, how do you approach them? So far I have not seen any complaints from Malaysia or some from when they want to do. See, when my student want to do, the Malay student, the Chinese student, the Indian student want to do work on the Sikh religion, the people are so helpful to assist them, to give them information and so on. So I think maybe the approach, maybe I'm not sure what is the issue there. In terms of whether exclusive or not, I don't see a Sikh as exclusive just because we are unique in our identity formation. The Sikh, we have a turban. Of course, the male, some of them got a long beard. Maybe people feel that they are very strict and so on. No, they are doing fine. And during the Indonesia tsunami, if you can look on the Indonesia tsunami in Aceh, there are many Sikh have volunteered from Malaysia to go and assist under this the Sikh global movement to help the Sikh to help the Achenese people in terms of managing the disaster issues during that time. And if you see the similarities little bit on the Muslim and the Sikh, Muslim and the Sikh, we also have the zakat. You know zakat? The teeth, the zakat. Our zakat is basically a 10% of our monthly income should be kept for the community purpose. And not just for the Sikh community. You can give to any society that need help, not just for the Sikh community. So that is one. And of course, in our Sikh scripture, we also have the religious contribution by the Muslim Sufi, by the Hindu saint, and so on in our, and also the Allah word. the word Allah also been repeated many times in the Sikh Guru Granth Sahib. So in terms of religious, in Malaysia, the Sikh are living harmoniously, I think, with other society, and of course same together, I think, in Indonesia as well. So I don't see an exclusive. They are not exclusive. They just want to maintain their own ethnic identity and religious identity. So maybe for some people that might be an exclusive, and so on. Thank you.
Yeah. And how about the abilities of the Sikh community to preserve the information of the history of the family?
Oh yes, they preserve that. They keep, and of course in the Gurdwara itself, they keep a lot of records, historical records. I myself, I spend a lot of time in the National Archives when I study on the Sikh for my PhD. There's a lot of good records in the archives and also in the temple. So they keep all the record 1920s, 30s, and so on. So from there, as a researcher, we are able to extract the historical artifacts, record, and so on. So of course, in the family, we are also been told to keep information about our parents, grandparents, rival, and so on. So that is the reason why I think the Sikh, basically they know about their history, and in terms of the Sikh diaspora, they are everywhere in the world, and in terms of the unity among the Sikh is quite strong in the West and also in the ASEAN region. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Sarjit, for answering the questions. Is there any question from the audience?
I just want to add a little bit on the Portuguese in Malacca.
Okay, sure, Prof.
So I think it's interesting because
Yes.
they are facing a development issue there. If you look on this map now on the Portuguese settlement, outside the Portuguese settlement, the government is building a very huge, what they call this, a project from China, all right? So Malacca Gateway, the name of the project called a Malacca Gateway. It's a R1 billion project, and it's just beside the Portuguese settlement. So I have advised the community leaders some years ago that they need to raise this issue, because I don't see any environmental impact assessment or social impact assessment has been done on this project. Because if you want to make any development in the community, you need to do a social impact assessment to ask the community whether the development have any are they damaging your society or cultural knowledge, whatever. So if you look on this community Portuguese settlement, they are very nice settlement, beautifully done by the state government to preserve the community there. But unfortunately, because of this Malacca Gateway project, 60 to 70% of the Portuguese people are having problem in their work because they are basically fishermen. See, so they are affected with this project, and this is a R1 billion project, and recently I think the government also have some difficulty, because the community. I've also advised the community to make a lot of noise, because being an anthropologist and I study community, I can see how their land, the area are not been respected in terms of their culture, the tradition. But the government celebrate the Portuguese celebration almost every year. This is the beauty of the Malaysian government. We celebrate all the minority ethnic celebration, whether it's Portuguese celebration, Christmas, Hari Raya, Deepawali, Vaisakhi, what they call this, Buddhist tradition and all these things. So that tradition is need to be kept alive. So that my concern with the community of Portuguese there is because the issue of development that has affected their economic sustainability. That's my main concern there. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any response, Prof. Vitor, according to Portuguese community in Malacca? Because maybe if we are tracking in the historical roots, they have strong historical ties with
Yes, it's a
global.
topic that I really love and like very much. The Portuguese minorities, the Portuguese descendants, the well, all over the world. We have many Portuguese unknown communities. Even many of them, they are Arden. Some of them, they still to have a Creole. They talk a kind of Creole, like the Cristang of Malacca, Papiamento. I lived in Macau until 2015. I know a little bit of this reality. Mainly the Macanese, the Portuguese mestizos of Macau, they still to have a connection with the Portuguese of Malacca. Many of them, they descend of Portuguese from Malacca. They came to Macau in 1644 when the Dutch they ruled in the Malay Peninsula. But some of them, as Professor Sargent Gill says, they remain there. They were fishermen, poor people, and they still to live as in a small district outside of the nuclear old town and the Dutch old Dutch town. Even the vestiges of Portugal, the fortress, the majority of the walls, they were destroyed. The Dutch, I'm sorry, but it's the truth, and only remains a tower there. And the Portuguese community, they still to be Catholic. They have some missionaries, but not permanently. It's another problem about the continuity of the spreading of the Catholics in the archipelago and Malay Peninsula. It's the continuity was interrupted, and they never left permanently priests there, and the people with the faith, they need to be guided by the priests. Without a priest, the faith will be lost. And the Muslims, for example, they still have, they create the mosques, they create communities like the Hindus, for example, like the Sikh, all over the world, the communities of the Sikhs, the Gurdwara, it's extended in each community, and they have the spiritual behavior, they have the religious zeal observed and continued. The Catholics, they were abandoned, for example, in many islands of the archipelago, and it was easy to replace for another faith. And the Muslims, for example, they convert the noblemen, they convert the chiefs, the rulers, and of course the people, they followed the rulers, and it was easy to keep the faith in the Ummah, in the Dar es Islam. The Portuguese of Malacca, the Portuguese, we in Portugal, few people knows about this. It's something exotic. For many people, they don't know that it's a minority with lots of elderly people. 90% of them, they don't know anything in Portuguese. Only in the prayers they can pray some prayers with some Portuguese words. The dialect is also losing, and they don't have a spiritual guidance, or they have a integration in the Portuguese international network. Well, it's true, they were abandoned by the diplomatic networks of Portugal, and they are resisting against the time, against the destiny to survive. They have some restaurants, they have some associations, they still to sing, and they have some collectivities trying to survive. But I don't know, in 20, 30 years, if really they will choose to be a Christian, or even they will be integrated in the Malay Catholic communities, if they survive the Portuguese Creole dialect there. But it's a very real, interesting aspect of these people that remind the Portuguese, the Farangi, the Frangi, the Franqui, the Franks. Well, you called us many words. They were very important because they were these Farangi, these mestizos. They were the translators that the Dutch and the British they discovered too. They used to communicate with the Asian peoples, mainly in Southeast Asia. You know that the Dutch families in Indonesia, they used to talk in their homes, to talk a kind of Portuguese. It's very similar of the Cristang of Malacca. It was a private and familiar language. Instead, they used to talk in Dutch, of course, but they learned when they were a child from the amas, from the servants. Many of them, they were descendants of Portuguese, and they have a special ability to speak languages. And what they work in their homes of the Dutch colonial power, and they used to be the translators, like in Hong Kong, like in many areas in the Southeast Asia. These Farangi, the Frangis, the Franquis, they were used to be the translators. But in the many of them, they were converted to Islam, to the even to the Hinduism. Someone they came back, they returned to be Muslims. Many of them, they still to be even Calvinists or someone Catholics. The people of Tugu, they descend in Jakarta, they descend of these old communities of these servants, the Francis. It's a very interesting aspect of the Portuguese diaspora, but really what we are supporting, for example, the Cristang of Malacca, not so much. And it's a very interesting aspect. Now we are trying to rediscover these minorities in the linguistic approach, sometimes on the historical or heritage approach, but we need to do more about this. It's a very interesting topic. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prof. Vitor. But there is one question from Aquas to Prof. Vitor. Why Portuguese was success to spread missionaries in the Eastern Indonesia? And up until now, Portuguese language has been used in the praying in the church.
Because we still to rule East Timor until 1974, 75. We still to be the rulers there. The Portuguese, the missionaries from Portugal, they still working there. The Jesuits mainly, they opened a seminary in Dare near Dili. This seminary it's a high school for the future priests. This seminary was very important in the cultural formation and the attractivity of the Christianity there. In Flores, for example, it's the biggest old Catholic community in the archipelago. They still to live some priests there. We have a continuity of the missionaries from Portugal based mainly in East Timor and working in Ende, Larantuka, even in Kupang in West Timor, where they have many Catholics there. But these communities, they resisted to the Dutch Calvinist impositions, for example. They still to share with the Muslims communities, but they still to be Catholics because they have the priests and they have the confraternities, basic and popular organizations centered in the unique proposal to support the poor people. It's a kind of zakat. It's a kind of institution that they have to zeal the faith and working in the name of a saint, Christian Wali, as you know, the confraria, the Rosario. If you go to Ende, if you go to Larantuka in the Eastern time, you will find many people making processions, making rituals, using with this umbrella of the confraternities, small or local organizations, Christian Catholic organizations, that they still to be Catholics until nowadays. And they converted also the kings of the region, like the Muslims they did in the whole of the archipelago. There in Solor, in Flores mainly, and East Timor, they still to be Catholic because they were priests, local priests, talking, missionating and preaching popularly in the local languages. For example, they create dictionaries. They use the Tetum, for example, in the East Timor, and they formatted priests from native people. It was different than the priests that come from Europe or from Macau or from Goa in India, because they know the customs, they know the traditions. And it was why in pair of the colonial power in East Timor, the reason that the continuity of the Catholic Church was a reality there.
Well, thank you so much for the response. Is there anything else? If there is no questions anymore, and one more, actually it's not a question, but it's I would like to ask a suggestion, recommendation to both of the speakers, because here we have fellow students from Faculty of Humanities. They come from various field study, Bachelor of History, Anthropology, Library Science, Literature, and etc. So would you like to recommend us the certain topics that including in your field of expertise that will or that can be worked by our students to research on that topic? Would you like to recommend a certain topic? Because I saw some students here, and surely that they want to get the idea or the topic that they should do for the research. Please,
Sorry,
Prof. Vitor.
it's with me about
Yeah, Prof.
what
Vitor.
kind of topics. Well,
Yes.
We can to make another seminar to talk about perspectives and ways to. But for example, there are many topics to. In my CV that was presented by Professor Lamcia, and for you also, I work in the evaluation of rare and old books, about libraries, old libraries. Well, in the Western culture, it's very important, but you, the Muslims, you are the people of the book. Your faith is centered in a book, like the Sikhs, like many Asian faiths and religions. And it's very important to preserve this memory through the books. The books, they are, the books, when they are locked, they never do anything. We have to open and read the books, and we have to maintain to keep the materiality. We have to keep the essence of the books, because the books, the Quran, the holy book, the Bible, the sacred books of the Sikh faith, the memories of the gurus and the Sikhs, for instance, they keep a very high importance to the revelations and to transmission of the faith, the principles of the faith through the books, like the Indians, the Hindus, for example. Well, it's very interesting in the Indonesian perspective, not a European or a North American. I am a defender of the perspectives, the local perspectives, to keep these memories defended and saved. And with a strategy to open and to connect with the students, with the teachers, with the researchers, because, for example, one of my proposals in my communication was to talk about the perspectives of the chroniclers, about the books, about the writings of Asian, Muslim, Hinduist, and Portuguese that they lived, and they were able to know how they live there in Asia, differently than the perspective of the monk in the scriptorium in Portugal or in Europe, talking about something that they heard with filters. It's different than we know directly. If I know Arabic, if I know Sanskrit, if I know Malay, if I know the Indonesian Bahasa, it's more efficient for my knowledge about a culture that I want to study. For example, we discover many aspects in the approaches of the literature, another topic that we have to develop the Indonesian literature. I have a year attending this seminary, Mr. Daya Vijaya. It's a very smart and very good student of doctorate here in Portugal. He's from Indonesia. He's studying actually with expertise the literature and the Indonesian sources, comparing with the Portuguese and European sources. That is a very interesting path and way to follow and to track, to open the memory to the future, to spread the knowledge, observing each one our faith without any fights, of course, but it's very interesting and important. Each one keep the memory safe through the old books, through the libraries. And it's very interesting because it's at the same time a big deal for the people who want to sell the books, the old books. You can win lots of money if you want, but more than this, it's better if you protect, if you preserve and protect and save the books. Yes, I think it's more than this. It's very important. We change, we share, and we talk about us in our perspectives about your country, about Southeast Asia. We have to, for example, many people, I work about Islam. I'm not a Muslim, but of course I study how profoundest I can the Islam to clarify my students, in even the attendant, the public in general, that the tendencies, Islam is different than what we see in the TV, what we watch. Many people are confounding, disturbing many ideas about the Islam, the real, the value and the cultural diversity, the marvelous world of the Islamic culture and faith. And we have to try to observe and know more about the experiences of the Islam in different cultures, the spreading of the Islam, for example, to share here in the West with the people, and also to invite the people to connect better and more the Asian cultures, not only Islam, even the Sikhs. Many people, they know the Golden Temple of Amritsar, but they don't know what really is the Sikhism. It's a religion, a faith that began at the same time of the arrival of the Portuguese in India, for example. It's very curious. The Sikhs, they developed they're spreading at the same time as the Portuguese, they spread it over the Indian Ocean. And well, we have to materialize, we have to create a new experience of knowledge. We have the old books, we have the documents, we have the librarians, the archives, the records, we have the public and private records, and so. Lots of aspects that we have to do. And the cultural diversity at the same time, heritage, material and immaterial heritage. It's very important. I really appreciated the communication of my colleague from Professor Sarjit Gill. This approach of the materiality and immateriality of the culture in the past and nowadays with this digital era that we are living, how the students through the internet, through the web, they can accede to these memories, these identities, how they can build the identity, the faith and the religion, and the minorities, how they can survive using these technological tools that the future and the present offer to us. Well,
in other hand, we should reconstruct a new perspective, right? For example, in history, we have a perspective, Indonesian perspective, or Indonesian centrist, or local centrist, and try to abandon ignorance, the European perspective or Dutch perspective to write our history.
Permit me, Professor Noor.
Yes.
In 10 years, I'm not a prophet, of course. I'm sorry, but in 10 years, you in the Indonesian archipelago, in Malaysia, you will note your development and your really importance in the global world. The material, the economic, the political increasing you are living and you are building in your countries, they will be very well noted in the future. It's not only because you are the biggest Muslim nation all over the world, in the worldwide, but you have to justify this material importance, this material relevance with the cultural, with the identity, with history, with memory. If you cut your roots, you are like a tree without roots. You will fail and you will fall. And in the future, you have to build the generations, the present and the future generations, to give a different image, the real image of your peoples in the Southeast Asia to the world. It's not only to show off, it's to survive, it's to maintain your way of life, your tradition, your history, and your future. Please, I'm not a prophet, but we are studying, I'm studying very with lots of attention and accuracy. I'm trying, of course. You're increasing your uprising, your skyrocketing development, and your capacity to be a good example. This is very important. Differently than other superpowers, your soft power came from your identity, your capacity to, it's not to sell, it's to share, as you are doing now in this seminary. That I congratulate your very wonderful efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. Vitor. And how about you, Prof. Sarjit?
Yes, I strongly agree with Prof. Vitor views on the importance of understanding others, maintaining our heritage, and also in the sense of we look back on what is our cultural knowledge and history, religion, so that we must remember, we must also learn about others. So we need to know about other people around us, so that we become a good citizens of the country. We bring together people. We appreciate others. We should not just marginalize any small society, minorities group. So the idea of working together collectively and to bring the nation to the next level. Thank you. Thank you,
Wow.
Prof. Vitor.
Thank you so much, Prof. Sarjit. Thank you so very much to Prof. Vitor that
Thank you.
have been wider our horizon and understanding about the topics that we have been discussed in about 2 hours. Well, we should reach our end in this session. I'm not in a good part to make a conclusion, but appreciate for the speakers, for Prof. Vitor and Prof. Sarjit, that has been presented their findings and sharing their experiences regarding the field expertises. And again, thank you so much to the audiences, to the fellow students, to Mr. Ralph Wokan. Thank you so much for your coming to, yeah. Thank you again. Okay, I will give it back to the MC again. Thank you, and apologize that if I have some mistakes and to conduct the moderating this session, because it's 2 hours is not really enough for me to explore the new topics, especially in history and anthropology. Thank you again to everyone that has been attended in this wonderful webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terima kasih. Thank you.
Terima kasih, Prof. Vitor.
It was a pleasure. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay.
Terima kasih, Prof. Sarjit.
Thank you.
Terima kasih semua.
To Professor Vitor and Professor Sarjit. Yeah. I hope we can
Thank you,
join
Professor
cooperation
Ramsi.
together again in the future. Later we can communicate via email and via. Thanks again for Professor Vitor and Professor Sarjit.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you, Professor Ramsi.
Yeah.
Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mbak Nelly, as well.
Thank you.
Selamat siang.
Been a very
Okay.
wonderful moderator.
Stay
Yeah.
safe.
Mas Daya and participant.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
again in our
Thank
next seminary, Professor Vitor and Professor
Yeah.
Sarjit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to thank you to all the participants, to the audience. I thought that we will spend like 2 hours, but now it's been like 3.5 hours. And I just feel like the time is passing by, and then we don't feel quite enough actually, because it feels so short, because you have very insightful knowledge and research that you share with us. And it's really useful for our students in here, and also for the lecturers. And I'm sure Pak Alamsa also will be continue his research about the social religion and cultures as well. So yes, thank you for all the audience, and Professor, may I call you Pak Victor? Pak Victor and Pak Sarjit, and also Pak Froken, for all coming, and see you in our next seminary. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you, Afrizal, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Pak Afrizal, terima kasih Pak Afrizal.
Yeah.
Mas Daya, terima kasih Mas. Oke, thank you.